Alô? Oh, agora voltou. Bom, então, para dar sequência aqui, gostaria de convidar a Ivana Lemos, da Siena. Ela vai falar para a gente...
From Siena.
Só mais um minutinho, gente.
Just a minute.
Sincronismos técnicos aqui.
We are just working on some technicalities. Is that everything okay now? So Ivana is going to talk about the transformation of telecommunication in the age of artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Boa tarde, todo mundo me escuta bem?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to re-meet some faces. And for those who are remotely, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Okay. Technical adjustments. So for those who do not know me, I'm Ivana Lemos, and in the next 35 minutes, I'm going to talk about the transformation of AI and what it's bringing to our industry. Although I'm Brazilian, I work at the Global Division of Products and Solutions of Siena. And in this presentation, I bring... Can you hear me? Yeah. So in this presentation, I talk a bit about the global context, changes in network requirements and technology. Before I start, the material is written together with Francisco Santana, who is unfortunately not here, but has all the credit together with me. So in the agenda, I have three topics. Because AI is so new, I'm going to start about some of the foundations for us to be on the same page. Then I'm going to talk about the new demands and requirements. And finally, to close, I'm going to talk about how AI is changing network operation, as we call AI apps. So let's talk about concepts. Conceptually speaking, artificial intelligence can be grouped in four categories: by application, by objective, by functionality, and by capacity. Let's take a look at what it means. Applications, there are several, but vision, speech, and language is always present at the top of the ranking. And here, in a simple analogy with computational vision, it is as if computers had eyes and are able to manipulate, to handle, and extract information from images. In speech recognition, is it as if computers had ears to be able to understand everything that we are saying and convert audio into text? And with language processing, it is a step further, as if computers truly understood human speech. Going on with the slide, not every artificial intelligence is creative. There are AIs that are descriptive, that are very useful, for example, to classify objects. And in terms of predicted analysis, it concentrates on predicting analysis. Prescriptive analysis go beyond. It recommends the next step to be followed in that model recommendation. Very well then, when we get to the right portion of the slide and we think about functionality, then we have a concept that is not unique. Today, we have what we call narrow artificial intelligence, that is specific for specific tasks. And you can have a general AI, super AI, and aware AI. The three that I mentioned in this list are still in research and development today. And finally, capacity. The reactive AI, the most basic form, has no memory of past events. Limited memory AI is used for autonomous cars, for instance, where you can keep the information for some time and use the information to make decisions. The other two on the list are also under research and development, that is, intelligent with a certain level of awareness, and there are some ethic implications. All that said, when you're talking about machine learning, it is one of the technologies that facilitate artificial intelligence. The rationale is very simple. If you look at the slide, you have an algorithm. This algorithm extracts patterns with predictors. And then, if you see the types of models, you have several types of models with supervised learning, non-supervised learning, reinforcements. In this list, the supervised model, for example, is the most common form of learning. We have the algorithm, you have data, and then you have labels, and then you can calibrate algorithms. In the non-supervised model, the model tries to learn without predictors, without inputs. What does it mean? A type of model that people used at the time of the pandemic, for instance, to try to bring insights to things that we didn't know before. Then finally, the reinforcement model. What is this? Repeated calculations, almost an error and try and error model. And this model is used when we don't have sufficient data. So when you don't have sufficient data, you try to find levels of optimization by using this model. Regardless of the model, each model has to be developed. We have to prepare data, we have to train people. It is as if we were optimizing the model itself. So that is the inference, the prediction of the model itself, and assess if the model will bring relevant results, efficiency of 80, 90, 100%. And the concept of machine learning was introduced in 1959. And one of the main algorithms related to machine later are the neural networks, which leads us to the next topic. Neural networks, again, machine learning, and it is a technology that enables artificial intelligence. And neural networks as concept were introduced by the 1980s. And in the slide, we have the two main concepts. They are the convolutional and the recurrent networks. Recurrent networks, as the name says, are sequential and temporal, but not convolutional. Convolutional is predictive. And why does it all matter? Because around the 2000, the first convolutional network was able to recognize postal codes of 60,000 residents very precisely. But CNN around the 2000 was very hard to train. So for a long time, recurrent networks were preferable because it was easier to train them sequentially. It all changed when AlexNet, a CNN of 2012, LexNet, uh, started. And why it is relevant? Because it was much bigger than the first convolutional network. It was designed to recognize 14 million images using two GPUs. AlexNet is considered a development in artificial intelligence, but perhaps the greatest advancement was to show that it was possible to train a convolutional network in parallel. And why is that important? Because if you can train the network in parallel, then you have deep learning, which is a relatively new area of machine learning. And as Sam Altman, one of the co-founders of GPT, says, deep learning got predictably better with scale, and with that, the industry started to dedicate more resources to it, which leads us to the last point of our timeline in terms of concepts, which is the concept of transformers. A transformer is based on deep learning, and it is nothing else but a neural network with transformers, enables systems to learn with context, generate new information, and therefore become generative. And to close, transformers are complementary to convolutional and recurrent networks that are the two neural architectures that are the most common today, that are used today. So to close the introduction, you see that we have several enabling technologies, starting in 1959, neural networks in the 80s, to get to where we are today. So artificial intelligence as technology is part of a much broader concept. Okay. With this in mind, when we started using these models about 2 years ago, I think everybody had the feeling that the models knew everything. Oh, they know everything. There is nothing that they don't know. But the truth of the matter is that when we started using the models, we've realized that depending on activities or tasks, they not only needed more learning, but also more contexts. And today in the industry, one of the major topics in the race of commercial models of artificial intelligence is how to enhance these models, which leads us to our next point in the presentation. How AI models that we have today, the most powerful ones, can be enhanced or are enhanced. As a whole, models evolved thanks to three factors: data, algorithms, and compute power. These factors, in the one hand, have specific challenges. So let's take a look at these three factors and try and understand their implications on our day-to-day. Data. Okay, I think it's not new what I'm saying, but each new model or new version requires a massive injection of data. For example, Leoma 3.1 of Meta was trained with 15 trillion tokens. But there is an even bigger challenge as an industry. Many specialists today believe that the volume of data is going to become an obstacle in the coming years. Some predictions say that we are going to exhaust all human data in about 4 years, that is by mid 28, and that means that we'll need synthetic data, that is, data generated by machine to be able to continue advancing with training and specialization of models, which leads us to the last point. That's why today the industry not only wants more data, but also more ways to extract quality insights from data, which leads us to the algorithms behind the models. We mentioned about data. However, as everything in life, there are trade-offs. That is, we have two sides of the same coin. More data isn't necessarily the answer, depending on the application. The survey shows that for language models, the size of the model, that is more data, continues to be the highest indicator of performance. However, as the chart shows, that does not apply as directly to other applications, such as games, for example, or computational vision. And therefore, several of the concepts of the introduction that I mentioned are relevant. And why that? Because as use of AI cases expand and we have more applications, it is going to be expected to have different algorithms behind the different models, some more data intensive, others not as much. And the last point here is the following: the challenge of computational power. This perhaps is the aspect that our industry talks more often about. Uh, Computational power. Very conservative estimates suggest that growth for the demand of GPUs for AI servers to train these large models is about 4 times a year. So let's take a step back. For example, some of the models that we use on the day-to-day, commercial models, are already using 60,000 GPUs, public data. So imagine 60,000 times 4. You don't have even to do the maths. You see that the scale of growth is huge. So this is one of the challenges. On the slide before I changing, I circled AlexNet, which is one of the first models that I suggested, to show that in 12 years, the increase of the concept. But if you consider holistically in terms of technology, we have been working with this technology for dozens and dozens of years. With all that, with this introduction, so far, everything that I said was about artificial intelligence as an application. I haven't gone to network requirements yet. But now let's try and understand how AI can change network requirements. Okay. Just out of curiosity, energy is one of the first points that come out when we talk about AI. But we briefly mentioned on previous slides about the computational power as a challenge. And here I'm talking about GPU, basically one of the main factors to scale the model. What we haven't talked is the demand for energy in the GPUs. Just to give you some context, one GPU consumes from zero point 0.5 to 1 kilowatt of energy. An interesting parallel is that our brain, 100% of operation consumes 25 watts. So in terms of energy consumption, the human brain is 20, 40 times more efficient than technology today. And why is that important? It matters because energy is one of the first requirements and possible bottleneck for the growth and adoption of networks. Energy always appears on the top of conversation when we talk of AI, and there is reason for that. Data centers today consume 3% of global energy, and this number doubles every 5 years. Now, if you get a unit amount, just not to think of the global sphere, you get a typical data center rack, and you see the evolution of rack and energy. When the traditional data centers, we need a few dozens of kilowatts per rack. With the cloud, we doubled the demand. However, with AI, we know that the ramp up is going to be on average 4 times bigger for an infrastructure that is prepared for the demand. And today, it's not uncommon to hear that the average amount of a rack and a data center that is ready to receive AI is about 70 kilowatts per rack. And it's not uncommon to hear even higher amounts of the 70 kilowatts as a potential evolution of infrastructure. And in this context, the demand for energy is a potential bottleneck for the growth and adoption of AI. We talked about the rack, but let's expand it a bit. Let's go to the inside the rack, inside the server, and let's take a look. We always hear about clusters of AI that have servers of AI servers. And inside a typical AI server, you have the CPU, that's not new, but you also have the GPUs, the graphic processing units that are specialized for AI applications. Here I'm talking about GPU, and I should have said that before. GPU is not the only architecture available for AI, but it kind of dominates the market. So for this presentation, I'm focusing on GPU, but just for you to know, it's important to know that. But going back to the slide, if you take a look at the architecture that we have today, a single server is not enough. If you remember it well, I mentioned that these models use 600,000 GPUs. So you have to have many and many servers who will have to be interconnected. And then in red, you have these errors on the right side of the slide that represent the network connections with AI servers at the back end and at the front end of the broader infrastructure. So take a look at this construction block. Now let's expand it again to understand the scale of this architecture inside an AI cluster. So we talked about the rack, we talked about the server. Now let's talk about within, the inside of a data center. In a data center, you're going to find clusters. And if you take a look at that, this is the server I had on the previous slide. The first step is to scale vertically. So you're going to escalate the server, that is, interconnect several servers vertically and horizontally. And as I said, in a typical cluster, you are going to have the connection of the back end, and you can think as if it were a connection GPU, GPU in a simple way, and the connection to the front end. In the front end, it would be like a top of rack connection. And behind the top of rack connection, you are going to have other networks, an inference network, for instance, that is behind the top of rack. And this is a cluster, for example, for typical training. But if you have many GPUs and you cannot have everything inside the same data center, what do? Then you have the next point,
which is the following. Nowadays, it's quite hard to imagine a data center with all required energy, space to meet our demands for a data center with a full structure. Therefore, the data center interconnection campus, that is a reality which is required for connecting networks. So a stud case would be a data center for training on a cluster and another training on an opposite cluster, and all of them connected to the campus model. And distances may be lower than 20 kilometers, or metropolitan distances that may reach up to 100 kilometers. And each one of the requests in that sense, they represent a higher demand than the demand that we have in place in our framework nowadays. Both WAN and data center networks, we have addressed energy requirements, space, scalability, horizontal and vertical. Now let's talk about reach of latency. And one of the technologies which may help us is throughout coherent optical networks within and in the data center surroundings. Over here in red, there are three terminologies: the coherent in ZR, and this newest one, which is a light coherent.
A gente já tem as novas gerações de
We already have coherent optical technology, which are aligned to long-distance connections. But the ZR coherent running on 400 giga or even up to 800 giga, and they may be applied within the metro data center connections. And maybe a newer concept would be the light coherent. Such a technology is a optimized design technology with very low consumption, really low latency, to address short distance, like field distances, networks which are within data centers or those that are as far as 20 kilometers, not any further than that. And the AI applications, they are there to help us to solve a number of challenges for those new networks with the requests that are much higher than the ones we have been working so far.
Agora, eu falei bastante de infraestrutura, eu queria dar passo atrás, né? A gente falou bastante de infraestrutura.
Let's step backwards. Infrastructure, fine. And how about users' perspective? What will be the AI impact in the growth of internet? AI has not changed their internet traffic profile significantly.
De maneira ali que saiu muito do padrão esperado. A gente continua tendo os aumentos.
It still works within the expected standards, and the generative one has a text profile with a low data exchange. However, the way as we interact to models like that as users, that is being fastly developed as we now apply multimodal concepts, models which are based on image, texts, video, everything simultaneously. With that, we expect some behavioral changes of our users. We are going to have people watching videos, machines watching videos, and machine creating content. If we take this predictive scenario into account, traffic goals driven by AI may be significant. Here we see twofold higher internet traffic yearly, and then 250-fold higher in comparison to 2023 by 2030.
Pouco aqui, a questão do conteúdo de IA
AI content and AI videos, they are not necessarily stored on a CDN. So what would be the main implications for our regional networks? As we are now dealing with a new peering scenario or maybe look after inference networks and understand how we may peer to other data centers. All this matters once we see a development in our infrastructures. All these aspects, they have to be considered as they might change our CDN cache framework, especially as to inference and measurements taken by the training clusters, which eventually are centralized in countries like the United States. And last but not least, we've talked about infrastructure and the users. AI has a very high level of compliance from a company's perspective. We see several companies such as AI agents, automation for backlog office of the company, and data-driven. There is a private AI generating real-time data, and to the cooperative, we see that change taking place parallel to everything else that is also taking place. Interconnection is one of the pillars, internet is another one, and corporations. Everything is happening fast in a very dynamic manner, but there are several skills and capabilities that can help us to be ready for today's network. We see a need for distributed training, which will help a CDN model. We also have inference, which gets more complex and very relevant in Brazil, as we have to really consider that inference on a multimodal data, and also enterprises AI initiatives stressing cloud exchange. And now we are getting into the enterprise era working on AI initiatives. And to close and conclude, much we have been said about concepts, infrastructures, and I know that there are many of us who work in operations, like myself, and AI concept is very real in fact. This is just a drop in the ocean. To exemplify some case studies. And from a framework perspective, we have three categories. We have flaws mitigation, performance optimization, and also network operations workflow automation. As to failure detection and mitigate that, improving performance, that is quite feasible to most of us. However, processes, they might be more complicated as they are kind of new. We have agents talking to us through websites, and this sort of integration is very common in management and inference tools. You may open an agent and ask them how to set up a certain service, and the agent will help you doing that as if it were a real interaction. And there is much happening, not just in automation, but in young models, how to integrate a model to another, and so on. Regarding technology, some tech principles are essential and should be considered. We have some cases that if the agent tells you something as how to drop a network, you have to be more precise because that's not exactly what you are looking for. Those cases where precision is not, or accuracy is not highly required, they are being managed in a modern manner. And to improve accuracy of AI responses, we apply two different resources. One of them is tool chaining, combining AI with search, as if it was really a logical chaining to increase accuracy of AI responses, and training standards LLMs with specific contents like product documentation, improving accuracy and usefulness of that specific model. That is increasing considerably accuracy on any AI responses or operational systems. Some final remarks?
Essa questão da inteligência artificial,
AI
ela é uma história em evolução. A gente
is
tem
a race under developing.
A gente não é algo que vai
It keeps changing, but there is no turning back. It will just go forward, but never backwards. So we have business models, they will develop based on AI, and we have to be tuned to that. We have many experts trying to understand a ready infrastructure for services, and those who are in operations, there is, ready stuff ready to go. Take a look, because the sky is the limit. Thank you for your attention. I hope that my talk was relevant to most of you. And in our booth, we have a way to show you how all of that is taking place. If you have a chance, just stop by. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Ivana.
Thank you, Ivana. Are there any questions to Ivana?
Tem uma pergunta online.
Vamos lá.
We have a question addressed online.
Beleza.
Que é, na verdade, assim, perguntando em relação
And the question is, as to telco and AI relationship, what is your take on existing extension of optical fibers? Well, this question has different angles. It includes infrastructure, interconnection, and I've heard once a statement which is quite significant. For AI, we'll need to change the chip 7 as far as layer 7. Several differences in the layout. Additional fibers will be required. The photonic piece of the job will be transformed. New technologies to cope with the different applications latencies. So it will be a huge change from its basic infrastructure, cables, adding more fibers, and it's been scaled up, and it goes from fibers until it gets to the cloud. Thank you, Ivana. Anyone? No, thank you so much.
Dando sequência aqui na nossa programação, queria convidar o Fábio Pessoa Nunes.
Next, we have Fábio Nunes from NIC.br, NIC.br, and he's gonna talk about the network development in SRv6 and EVPN.
Boa tarde a todos.
Hello, good afternoon. I am Fábio Pessoa Nunes. I'm part of the engineering team, IX engineering team for 12 years, and today I am a system network coordinator And I'm here today to talk, to update you about the technologies and updates in the networks. I will I'll give a background of the importance of L2 VPN, VPOS operations, what EVPN is, segment routing, what is that exactly, and what we are doing in our NIC.br. Layer 2 VPN is a design of an overlaying virtual network over a MPLS infrastructure. This is a technology which improves large-scale L2 VPN layers. It allows a fast creation of services at different ends of the network, ease expansion, service redundancy. I mean, a number of advantages to the traditional mode, which would have a different and outdated convergence way. VPOS, VPWS, and lately EVPN is becoming stronger than other networks. Our goal is to have a broadcast system over a one layer. VPOS is the main used on Internet Exchange. It works on a switch Ethernet over MPLS network, and a full mesh is raised among different PEs to create a bridge domain, allowing a communication between different points. A MAC learning is based on the original MAC based on a referral plan. And currently there are two ways as we can carry out the tunneling of a VPLS. It could be throughout VPLS or throughout LDP or BGP. And the protocols today are IGP, OSPF, ISIS, and we may commute to other transport labels. For the creation of those virtual tunnels to carry out overlay, and those are LDP or OBGP.
Como a gente está criando essa rede acima de uma rede MPLS, né?
As this new network is designed over another one, VPOS, in our Internet Exchange team, we face a number of issues as we work on large MAC domains on our broadcast. We have challenges to find proper balance between the different networks tracks, or even if we have several aggregated of ECMP, sometimes 64 portals, and that requires a proper balance within all those aggregated portals. And sometimes we are even crossing the same bridge domain of VPLS through that same trajectory or route. For that, two additional techniques are required to help balancing the traffic in the routers. And the first one is FAT, Flow Aware Transport. This is a label that is added in the VPLS show to indicate the flow to which that traffic belongs to. So the whole traffic of the same video domain, they will operate on a same label. And that label will be in the same portal, and other flows will take different ways. And control word, this is an additional label added at the portals, not the portals, he corrects himself, in the protocols pile to indicate that whatever is being taken through the VPLS.
Quando você está carregando Ethernet.
If you are carrying an Ethernet
desse Ethernet é iniciado
and a MAC which works on IPv4 or IPv6 per routers. Control word is then a feature that can understand that we are dealing with the Ethernet frame, and then the framework has to be based on Ethernet and not on IPv4 or 6. Those are two additional labels. They have to be added on our stack to allow proper balance.
Então aqui eu tenho exemplo de como é feito geralmente a pilha de labels num transporte.
The labels stacks transportation on a VPOS. If we don't use FAT or control word, we add labels indicating what is the destiny of that traffic, and another label showing me the type of service that I'm taking into that network. The VC tunnel would be the way of destination, and VC label the virtual cycle label. There is the domain where that traffic is being sent. After adding control word or flow aware label, two additional labels are being taken through the network. How about constraints in VPLS, especially in the internet exchange setting? It's not it is not an scalable application. We have one single British domain, and every time that I add a new PE, that raises additional complexity. There is no guarantee or whatsoever that all PEs in my network, they will have MAC address information. There is no control word telling me that the certain MAC in the network belongs to this or that PE. If there is any failure, migration, or change in the network, that will become a problem, as the network should once again understand the new MAC, where that MAC is, where the MAC is going to, if there was any sort of failure.
Aí, consequentemente, com essas falhas ou até
as a consequence,
fazendo uma grande quantidade de ARP request ou ND request,
even after a number of DNS or ART requests, as if the network behaves as a pure L2 VPN, I simulated the Ethernet into the overlay. There is no other driver to reduce art or food in the network. Users probably, or developers, they find that difficult, and we are always after a trouble solution. And the boom traffic, broadcast, unicast, or multicast, all other participants will get that bridge domain. All other PEs will get that package delivered and then submitted. It's part of the system. That is how it was organized, and we have to respect this boom traffic. Another limitation is not having a support allowing an additional CE connected to other PEs and both connections sending traffic simultaneously. In addition to the VPLS config, which is a bit more complex, is more hardsome than other configurations. With that, we understood we needed to create an additional technology that could be helpful in daily operations. What is EVPN? EVPN, there is a definition for EVPN, which sets requests for the next step for VPLS. So EVPN tries to meet or to improve all the issues that we had seen before in VPLS. And in May 2014, a new RFC 720009 had defined all these Ethernet requests for VPN. EVPN uses BGP extensions for information exchange, exchanging information between networks PEs, which may exchange information, building up tunnels that will allow communication between PEs. And due to the flexibility or extensivity of the BGP, that allows not just layer 2 tunnels, but also extension over extension. And despite they have layer 3 VPN and layer 2 VPN, so BGP, led to the evolution of several overlay VPNs. BGP then can be used as a network control plan, as it is responsible to negotiate all the information between the PEs, and communication or transportation between the PEs. They were initially defined as being a MPLS-based Ethernet, but due to the BGP size, we were able to open new possibilities to use other technologies such as VXLAN and segment routing. What are then the EVPN advantages? If we apply EVPN at layer 2 networks, what are the advantages? As we have a large MAC quantity, it's quite easy to scale that up. I am able to design new IPs into the network, extend domains for new IPSs easily, and I know that convergence will be much, much faster, and yet I can guarantee that the whole PE of the network has the same level of MAC address. If that MAC address is connected to that portal, to that BGP, all other PEs will get the BGP information, and that MAC address will be present at the initial pack. And that somehow guarantees that the control plan is accurate and information is available at all network devices.
With this guarantee, it is easier to recover failures. It is easier. And even move a connection from one side or the other of the network, because conversion is going to be easier. And also troubleshooting is going to be easier, because I know that the information is in the network. With VPLS, the control plane, sometimes you have the information of the MAC address in a box on a device, but in some point of the network it's not. So I have to know, is the MAC address here or not? Is the frame here or not? So it's a lot harder to troubleshoot.
Bom, mas como o EVPN faz essa troca de informação?
Now, how does EVPN exchange information? Basically, we use extensions at BGP.
Network layer reachability
information using the address family identifier 25 and subsequent address family identifier 70. And there are several routes within these specs. So each one of these routes is going to have a type of information to my network. For example, type 1 and type 3. Sorry, type 1 and type 4 are related to the multi-ROM BGP, the multi-home connection. So this way, I can announce to the network which points are actually connected and how I should address that connection in different PEs. For example, a CE that is connected to more than one PE, if not addressed correctly in terms of traffic that is being directed to it, we may cause a loop. So we have to know which port of CE I should change traffic of a podcast, for example, to be sure that I'm not going to have a loop in my connection. But in our case, at IXP, so I'm concerned about connectivity layer 2. So the information of MAC address that I'm sending to other PEs in the network, and how I should address the boom traffic in my network. So when the PE is announcing a route with MAC address or a bridge domain, it is going to be a type 2, a route 2 information, MAC IP advertisement. So this is information with MAC address X, and for you to reach me, you get through this tunnel. Type 3 is the same thing. If I want to send information, multicast, broadcast information to a PE, then I have to use this specific label that I am using in type 3 routes. So as I said previously, it is very simple to create new services and types. So new services can be created because I can have new types within the same network. This is the EVPN architecture. You have an underlayer of several PEs connected and the different routes, BGP routes, sending data to the network. As I mentioned before, I can optimize now the broadcasting, multicasting, unicasting traffic in the network. Especially IX participants know that broadcasting is an offender to connections, to routers. Precisely because it is handled directly at the CPU level.
a gente precisa de alguma forma de
So
tratar isso.
somehow we have to handle it. And
Ele tem
EVPN
essa informação no
has
BGP.
the
Quais são os MAC
information at
addresses? E,
BGP,
consequentemente, qual o IP
what
address está
the MAC
associado àquele
address
MAC
are,
address.
what IP
Eu
addresses are
posso
associated to those
facilmente
MAC
utilizar técnicas
addresses,
de proxy
so
ARP,
I
proxy
can
IP
use
nos PEs,
proxy
onde
techniques
os
at
PEs vão
PEs,
começar a
and
responder
PEs will start
diretamente
to
ARPs
respond
e NDs
directly
requisitados pelos
to
participantes,
the
no caso
requests
do
of
XP, né, do
XP
sucesso.
users.
Então, eu tenho aqui desenho aqui para
So
exemplificar.
this is just
Como
a
eu disse anteriormente, a gente pode ter
representation
no
of what I
BGP já
said.
todas as informações de
So you
ARP
can
e
have all
IND
the
da nossa rede.
information
E
of
sempre que roteador vai
ARP
falar para o PA, ó, quero
and
saber, tô
IND of
fazendo
the
ARP request
network. So you have a request
pro IP do roteador
for
B.
the
Quero saber o
IP
MAC
of
address dele.
router B. I want
Se
to
o
know
meu PE
what
já
the
tiver
MAC
essa
address
informação
is.
localmente,
If
atendido
my
pelo BGP,
EVPN
vou até
already
colocar ali
has the
estaticamente,
information attained from the
vai ter já uma
BGP
resposta
or even
local sobre
statically,
essa,
you're going to already
ARP
to have
do
a
ARP
local
local.
answer.
Então, a gente não
So
vai ter
you
mais
have a
flood
local
do
reply.
ARP para todos os
So you
participantes
no
ou todos os
longer
roteadores
need
conectados
a
nessas redes,
flow
certo?
throughout
Mesma coisa
the
para ND, né?
routers
Se eu tenho aquela
connected to
informação
the
já
network. The same thing applies
na
to
minha tabela,
ND.
no meu
If I
BGP,
already have the
ele vai ser
information
respondido
at
localmente ali
VGP,
e eu não
you are
preciso
going
fazer o
to
flood de todo mundo receber
respond
essa
locally
informação,
and you
certo?
don't have to send the information to everyone.
Então, com isso, a gente vai
So with
conseguir
that,
reduzir
we are
drasticamente
going to be able to
a quantidade de
dramatically
ARP e ND na
reduce
rede,
the
certo?
amount
E
of
ainda me dá a possibilidade de
uh,
criar estaticamente essas entradas ARP e ND.
ARP
No nosso
ND
caso,
in
no
the
XP, a gente
network,
tem essa
and
informação
also
de
have the
MAC IP,
possibility
porque a
of
gente que fornece o
statically
IP, e
create
vocês sempre pedem para a gente
ARP
colocar
and
o IP
ND
privado.
entries.
Então, a
In
gente
our
consegue criar
case, as
estaticamente essas
XP, we
informações
have the information of MAC and
e
IP, so
prevenir
we
problemas
can
como ARP,
prevent
ND e spoofing. Então,
problems
se algum participante
with
tentar
spoofing,
utilizar
for
o IP de
example.
outro
So if someone tries to use
participante
the
do XP,
IP of another
na hora que
participant,
for feito o ARP request na rede do
when
IP,
you have
eu
the
garanto
ARP
a
quest,
resposta correta.
I'm going to give the
Garanto que eu estou
right answer.
respondendo
That
o
is,
ARP
I'm
que
going
eu,
to
como
guarantee
operador da
that
rede,
I'm responding the
indiquei que
ARP that
realmente responde para
I,
aquele
as the
IP.
coordinator of the network,
Então,
allocated to that
primeiramente,
IP.
isso garante que ninguém vai
So
fazer
that
negócios para os self-service, mas garante também que
assures that no
ninguém
one
vai
is
fazer
going to
para
use ARP as
outros
self-service
participantes.
or to other
A
participants.
migração do VPLS para o EVPN é uma
The
coisa muito simples,
migration of
é transparente,
VPLS to EVPN is
tem
simple
uma
and
RFC para
transparent.
isso.
You have
E,
an RFC for
basicamente, a gente
that.
pode fazer isso de uma
And
forma bem
basically, we
incremental.
can do
Então,
that
eu tenho já minha rede
incrementally.
VPLS.
So you have your
Cada
VPLS
vez que eu
network,
adiciono
and
à minha
whenever
rede
you add
nó
to
que
the
fala
network
EVPN naquele
a
protocolo
node of
específico,
EVPN,
ele vai tentar achar,
it will try
basicamente, ele vai tentar achar ou vai
and
tentar comunicar
find
com outros
or
PS que
communicate
também
with
já falam
other
EVPN. Então, a
PEs
partir do
that
momento que eu tenho
already
dois
uh,
PS que
have the
tá no
EVPN. So
VPLS,
if I have
mas eu
two
coloquei os dois no EVPN
PEs
também,
in VPLS
eles vão
and in
ver as
EVPN,
suas rotas pelo BGP
they are
e
going to
automaticamente eles
see the
dão
routes through
shutdown no
BGP,
túnel de
and they will
VPLS
shut
e
down
fazer o
the
tráfego
VPLS and use the
passar apenas
traffic
pela
through
comunicação do EVPN.
EVPN.
Tá? Então, se acontecer algum problema com o
So
VPN,
if
precisar
there is a
voltar para o
problem
VPLS,
with
dá um shutdown ali na
EVPN
parte do
and you have
VPN
to go back,
do
then you
PE,
shut down
ele vai
EVPN
restabelecer o túnel
and
automaticamente do
they
VPLS e a
reestablish the
comunicação
path to
continua normal. Tá?
VPLS.
Se eu tenho algum nó que não fala,
If
não
you
fala
have a
VPN,
node
continua com
that
os túneis
does
VPLS
not have
sem problema,
EVPN, then you
até eu,
continue with
caso trocar
VPLS
esse nó, atualizar
until
ele
you
para um
make a
mais
change or
mais
update.
novo, que fale VPN. Então, no caso, os protocolos envolvidos
So the
usando o
protocols
EVPN enquanto
involved
interface,
using
BGP para fazer
EVPN
o
and
control plane,
PLS, the
IGP,
control plane
né?
for
E fazer a
BGP,
comutação de labels na parte de
and
transporte, pode
data
ser
plane you can
usando
use
LDP, RSVP, ou no caso do Segment Routing
LTP
IPLS, a
or
comunidade vai
SVP
utilizar,
or
o
SR
IGP,
and
no caso,
PLS
para poder
IGP.
eliminar tirar
We cannot eliminate
esses protocolos.
these protocols.
Bom, mas tá, por que a gente está, como eu disse,
Why, as I said, can we use several types of transport using EVPN? And why have we decided to use segment routing? Well, if you don't know, segment routing is a way of routing based on origination. And it is done based on segment lists. And what are segments? Segments are identifiers that indicate an instruction to be executed in the network. So it can be forwarding, it can be a service in the network, and you have two flavors of segment routing, so to speak. One that is based on labels, MPLS, and the identifiers, the segments are going to be organized by MPLS labels, and the IPv6 that, well, the segments are represented on the heading of IPv6. With the benefits of segment routing, we have a simpler network. You remove additional protocols such as DP or SVP. It's easier to have traffic engineering. In MPLS, for you to have loop-free alternate mechanisms, you have a bit more work. What I mean is that you need a bit more configuration, you need to do a little more. But with segment routing, it's native. It comes from the protocol, from the spec, from the technology of having topology independent systems. And you also avoid micro loops in the network. And why segment routing IPv6 in our case? Well, we took a look at that and we see that segment routing VC has the advantages of MPLS using IPv6 and nothing else. In our case specifically, and this is a very important point, crucially really in our operation, as I mentioned before, we have a problem with balancing traffic in the network between links, between routes, and then with IPv6, things are very simple. IPv6 has a control label. It already knows the flow that is being sent with the package. And when the network starts using the field, we don't need anything else. So if I use my traffic on IPv6, I'm going to be using this field and I'm not going to have any issues. I don't need labels, I don't need further controls, so the problem is solved. And we know that IPv6 is very extensive. It's easy for you to create new features for it. That's the way it was designed. And so we see new features being launched all the time precisely because of that. People are adding things to IPv6 because it's easy to do so. So in our case, in a nutshell, IPv6 enabled us to start implementation today. Because if I were to use MPLS, I would have to have additional protocols implemented by vendors. And I have no guarantee that all vendors are going to do this today or are able to do this today. So I'm going to try and say how SRv6 works in microsegments. Basically, when you're going to create the VPN service, you define the locators, which are IPv6 blocks of 48 bits that will represent a group of functions in the device. And that block of functions is announced by the IGP.
Aqui eu estou anunciando via
Here
ISIS.
I'm announcing via
E todos os serviços
ISIS,
adicionais
and all additional
eu
services
vou fazendo em cima
are going to
desse
be
locator, desse barra 48.
handled
Então, como vocês podem ver
through
nessa figura
this
ao lado
locator.
aí,
So
a gente
on
tem
the
o
side
locator e cada daqueles 16
drawing,
bits
you see the
do
locator,
endereço
and
de
each
vocês
one of the 16
agora
bits
indicam
of
do
the
endereço do
address
destino do cabeçalho de
indicate
vocês,
the
né?
destination
Agora eles vão
address,
indicar
and then
para a minha rede.
they will
Então,
indicate,
como vocês podem
they
ver ali,
will
eu tenho
send
6
information to my network. So I have
microsegmentos que são
6 microsegments
instruções para
that
minha
are
rede.
instructions to my
Claro,
network.
eu
Of
tenho sempre eu
course,
vou ter uma instrução que está
I
a
will
instrução
always have
ativa no
an
momento,
instruction
que
that
sempre
is
vai ser o
active at the
microsegmento 1.
time,
A
which
partir
is
do momento
always
que eu
going to be
executei aquela
segment
ação,
1. But once
aquele
you
microsegmento
execute segment 1,
é removido e há
the
deslocamento dos
microsegment
outros
is
segmentos
removed,
para
and we go to
todos
the next segment. So all the
as primeiras
segments
posições,
move
certo?
to the top positions.
Então, como eu disse, assim,
So as I
todos os
said,
serviços vão ser baseados
all
em cima daquele
services are going
locator.
to be
No caso
based
do
on the
VPN
locator,
especificamente,
and in the case of IP VPN,
o
specifically
BGP
EVPN
vai
specifically,
anunciar, quando for anunciar
BGP,
daqueles,
whenever I
daquelas
want to
rotas Type
announce to
3
the
ou
routes type
3 ou
3
Type 2,
or type
eu
2,
vou indicar
I'm going
qual
to
o
indicate
biolocator e também qual a
the
instrução que eu estou
biolocator
dando,
and
qual é
also the instruction that is being given.
microsegmento
That is the
que
microsegment
representa aquela
that
rota, que representa aquilo
represents
que eu estou
that
anunciando para a
route,
rede.
what
Tá?
I am announcing to the network.
Então, no caso, assim, você pode pensar,
So
mas só
you
6
can think, but
instruções,
only
e se eu precisar de
6
mais coisas, se eu precisar de
instructions. What if I need more?
mais
What if I need
dados numa rede
more
muito grande,
data if
aí
it's
tem
a
a opção
big
de
network?
você adicionar
Then you have the
extensões do
option of
cabeçalho de
adding
vocês,
extensions
utilizando o
to the
segment
heading
routing header.
using a segment routing.
Então, aqui só especificando a
So
RFC
here,
que especifica
just
como deve ser esse
specifying
anúncio
how
das
the
informações do
announcement
SRV6
of
para o BGP, né,
information takes place
no EVPN.
at EVPN.
Então, aqui já no caso de criação de
So
serviço, a
here,
gente pode
if
ver
you
que
want to create a
eu
service,
criei
for instance,
uma VPN, né,
you
elevador
create a
VPN,
VPN,
eu
you have
especifiquei ali
a layer
serviço
2
local ali,
EVPN, then you have
sink,
a
né,
local service,
locator,
a
e o MAC
locator,
address
and a
ali
MAC
específico que está
address
sendo anunciado para a
that
rede,
is
que
announced
coincide
to the
ali
network with
FB
that number specifically,
DE4132E002.
DE
Então, todo o
4123.
resto da rede vai receber
So
essa informação do
all the
BGP
network is going to receive the
e vai
information
saber, bom,
from
se eu
the
quiser mandar
BGP
algum
and
dado
will
para
know,
esse MAC,
well, if I want to send
eu
data
tenho
to
que
this
colocar,
MAC,
encapsular
then I have to
num
encapsulate
cabeçalho
it
IPv6
within
com esse
an
endereço de destino.
IPv6 heading with this address and destination.
Aqui eu tenho mais, olhando mais a parte do anúncio
And
dessa
here
rota pelo
you
BGP.
have the announcement
Então, a
of
gente
the
pode ver
route by BGP.
toda a estrutura do BGP
You
ali
see the
informando qual é o
structure of
MAC, qual é o
BGP
locator que eu
informing the
estou
MAC,
utilizando.
the locator that is being
Uma coisa muito
used.
interessante, como
One thing that
o
is very
começo
interesting,
do EVPN começou
the
pelo
beginning
MPLS
of
foi feito
VPN,
os
we
outros
started with
protocolos
MPLS and we had
baseados
other
nessa estrutura.
protocols based on this
A gente vê
structure.
ali campo
And
MPLS
so
label.
you see an
Mas esse MPLS label, na
MPLS
verdade,
field.
pela
But
especificação,
this
representa
field,
qual que é
based on
a
the
microinstrução
specification, just
que eu tenho que colocar no meu endereço de
refers to the
destino
micro
para enviar
instruction that I have to have
alguma
in
coisa,
my
dado
destination
para
address
aquele
to
destino.
send data to that destination.
Então aqui eu tenho uma rota de
So
tipo
here
2,
I have
certo?
a type 2 route.
Então aqui mesma coisa, você vê a tabela MAC
The
do
same thing,
equipamento,
a
tudo
MAC
mais.
table of the
Tem o
equipment.
MAC, como eu faço para chegar
You have the MAC
naquele destino.
address, how you get to the
Certo?
destination.
E mesma coisa para uma
And the
rota de
same
tipo 3, quando eu for
applies
fazer
to a type
broadcast ou
3
multicast na
route
rede,
when I want to have a
tem os mesmos
broadcast or a
anúncios
multicast
indicando qual
in the
label,
network.
qual
The same
microsegmento que eu tenho que utilizar e qual
information,
locator
microsegment to be
referente
used,
àquela
and
rota,
locator
aquela instrução.
for that specific instruction.
Então, bom, basicamente aí
So
indicando,
basically,
mostrando
this
como
slide shows
a criação desse
creation
cabeçalho aí. Então,
of
no
the
caso,
heading.
o meu PL de
So in my
entrada, o PL1,
case, my
quando eu recebo
PE1, the entry
frame
PE,
internet,
When I
ele vai
receive
encapsular isso dentro de
the
IPv6
frame
com aquele
as a
endereço de
net,
destino
it
do
encapsulates in
MAC,
the IPv6 with the
contendo
MAC
as
address,
informações do
with
segmento
all
routing
the
V6. Então,
information
se a
of
gente olhar
the
ali, a
segment
primeira
routing
instrução, nível
V6.
segmento 1,
So the
está me
first
falando,
instruction in
vai,
segment 1
manda
is
esse
saying,
manda esse pacote
send
até o
this
PE1.
package until
A hora que chegar no
PE1.
PE1,
When it
aquela
gets to
instrução é
PE1, the
removida do pacote,
microinstruction
ela
is
ativa,
removed
vira
from the
nível
package,
segmento 2, vira
and the
nível
next
segmento 1,
is
e aquele nível
microsegment
segmento
2 that
2,
turns into
que
1.
agora é o 1,
And
indica que aquele
this
tráfego
segment
DRC,
is going to
eu devo
show
remover
that
todo o
the
cabeçalho
traffic,
IPv6
we
e
have
eu
to
devo fazer um
remove
lookup,
all the
olhar para a tela de
heading
layer 2 para fazer o
and
encaminhamento
look at
daquele
layer
frame,
2
daquele MAC
to
address
be able to
que está
route
naquele
that
internet que eu estou
information
carregando. Tá?
on the Ethernet that I'm carrying.
Então, mesma coisa num
And the
traffic
same
engineering
thing with traffic
posso querer
engineering
fazer. Então, ali você,
that I
a gente
might
pode ver
want
que
to do. So you
ah,
see,
eu adiciono as instruções para onde eu quero
I
mandar
add
aquele
instructions
frame,
to
aquele
where I
pacote
want to
específico.
send that
Então, ali, a hora que
specific
entrou no
package.
PE1, eu
So
tinha
when I am
instruções,
at
primeiro manda para o
PE1, the
PE3, depois
instruction
manda para o
was first
PE4,
send it
o
to
P3 para o
P3,
P4,
then
depois manda para o PE2
P4,
e por
then
fim remove todo
P2,
o cabeçalho
and
IPv6 e
then
faz
you
o
remove the
encaminhamento para o bridge domain
IPv6
IPv6.
heading and you have any specific development.
Então, como eu disse anteriormente, eu tenho uma
So
simplificação
as I mentioned,
da minha rede,
with
porque eu tinha
that, you
1.090
can
protocolos,
simplify
agora é
the
só
network because you
control plane com
decrease the number
BGP,
of protocols. It's just
meu
control plane with
protocolo, meu
BGP
IGP fazendo a
and
troca
IGP
de rotas
for
e de
the
segmentos.
change of routes and segments.
Falar rapidamente o que a gente tem feito.
So very briefly,
Então,
what have we been doing?
Desde 2016 a gente estava
Since
procurando uma solução
2016, we
de
were looking
VPN,
for a
porque a gente
VPN
realmente via
solution
que não
because
estava
we
escalando da forma que a gente
really saw
estava
that we're
operando. A
not
gente realmente,
escalating
o
as
VPLS
we were
estava
operating.
chegando no limite, a gente
VPLS
precisava
was
mover para o
getting to a
VPN.
limit. We needed to
Depois de
move
muita
into
discussão com
VPN.
vários
And
vendors,
after
com várias
lots of
tentativas e várias
discussions
muitas
with
coisas,
different vendors,
vários
several
testes,
attempts, several
em
tests,
2013 a gente
in
conseguiu realmente uma
2023,
solução adequada
we
para as nossas
got a
necessidades.
suitable solution for our needs.
Aí, em fevereiro de
In
2024, a gente
February
realmente
24,
implantou uma rede
we
em
actually
Brasília, uma rede
implemented
nova,
a network in
com esses
Brasilia, a new
equipamentos, mas
network
utilizando
with the
encaminhamento
equipment
com MPLS.
and using MPLS.
Em junho, a gente fez essa
In
mudança
June,
para
we
segment
changed
routing.
to segment
E, por fim,
routing.
agora em agosto, a
And
gente
finally, in
ativou
August
Proxy ARP e
last,
Proxy ND
we
nessas redes para
activated proxy
eliminar
RP and
diminuir
ND
bastante a quantidade de
to
broadcast e
decrease
multicast
the
nessas redes.
number of broadcasting and multicasting in
Então,
the networks.
quem é participante
So,
do X Brasil
if you
provavelmente já deve
are
ter
part
sentido
of
uma
IX
diferença grande
Bazaar,
na
you
quantidade
probably
de ARP,
felt a
então,
huge
ARP
difference
e
in the
ND,
amount of
e
ARP and
também não
D,
está mais recebendo
and
nada de
you're no
unicast
longer
de seus routadores.
receiving
Né? Então, a
anything
gente tem visto
that is
realmente ganho muito grande nessa implementação.
anomalous or anonymous, I'm sorry,
Aqui só
from
alguns
those
gráficos mostrando
routers.
realmente dos benefícios
Here's
que a gente
some
teve
charts
lá na
just
rede
showing the
em Brasília.
benefits we
Então,
had
a
in
gente
the
pode ver
network in
que
Brasilia.
a gente não
So
tem
you
mais
see
unicast na
that
rede,
we
e agora a
no
gente tem que
longer
garantir que
have
todos os pairs tenham a mesma
unknown
informação de minutagem,
unicast.
então eu tive a confiança
We
para ir lá e
all have
desabilitar
the same
o fluxo de
information
unknown
about
unicast.
MAC
Então,
addresses.
nada mais de unknown unicast em Brasília.
So unknown
Na
unicast
questão de
is
ARP, a gente podia ver que
zero in
antes a gente
Brasilia.
tinha
In terms of
volume
ARP,
ali
we
relativamente
had
alto
a
de ARP.
relatively low,
Assim que a gente
high
aplicou o
volume,
Proxy ARP,
and as
teve
we started working
uma
with
redução muito
proxy
grande.
RP, we had
E
a huge
a ideia é que,
reduction.
na verdade, a gente
And the
coloque
idea
essas entradas estáticas num segundo
is to
momento.
have
E, na
static
verdade,
entries
essa
at some
quantidade ali que a gente
point.
ainda vê alguns
And the
picos,
amount, because you do
participantes
still
entram
see
na
some
rede,
peaks,
participantes saem da rede,
participants
então é
join the
normal ter ARP,
network. When they leave the
mas quando a
network,
gente
we
colocar
generally
estático,
do
isso não
have
vai ter mais tempo, não
ARPs,
vai ter mais nada de
but
ARP
when we are
sendo cruzado pela rede.
static,
Tá?
we are not going to have any ARP.
Mesma coisa para o
And the same
ND.
applies
Então, a gente
to
viu lá que
ND.
depois que a gente habilitou
So you
o
see
Proxy
that
ND,
after we
teve uma
activated the
diminuição muito
proxy
grande
ND, we had a
de
substantial
neighbors coverage.
decrease in terms of volume in the network. The main objective is São Paulo, but this is a lot more complex infrastructure in terms of deployment. We have more equipment, different vendors, a much more critical infrastructure than the other XPs, for sure. It is the largest IXP in the world. No other IXP has such a complex scenario, so many participants, a diversity of participants, knowledges and everything. So we do have some complexities that are very unique. Even vendors, when we come and talk to them, sometimes they are a bit scared. They really cannot understand how we got to that scenario. So we are in a process in São Paulo of making changes and updates. Currently, we do have equipment using EVPN and IPv6 in São Paulo, and approximately 10% of the MAC addresses of participants in São Paulo are already part of the EVPN network of NIC.br. So we hope for the first half of 25 to really speed up the process and have most of the network with EVPN. So basically, this is what I had to share with you. The takeaway message is that traditional networks really don't escalate well. EVPN is very important when you really want to build large layer 2. And in the specific case of XP, the feature of proxy ARP and proxy ND are essential. I do not see an IXP without them. That's it.
Obrigado, Fábio. Perguntas para o Fábio?
Fábio, bom, primeiro
Any
parabéns pela
questions?
apresentação,
Well, Fábio,
parabéns
congratulations on your presentation.
pela iniciativa do X de
And
trazer o EVPN e tirar dos
IX
maiores problemas e
initiative
começar a
of
tentar tirar
bringing
um dos maiores
EVPN
problemas
and
do
starting
X de
to
São Paulo, que é
remove
horrível.
the problem that we have
Eu
in
fiquei
São
muito feliz
Paulo.
de
I was
ver
very
que
happy to
está no
see
roadmap de vocês
that it
chegar em São
is
Paulo aí
on your
no
roadmap
primeiro
to
semestre
be in
do
São Paulo in
próximo
the
ano.
first half of next
Eu
year.
quero muito acreditar nisso,
I really want
mas
to
eu
believe
acho
this,
que é
but
desafio muito
I
grande.
think it's a
E a minha
huge
principal
challenge.
pergunta é, beleza,
So my
fizemos
main
em
question
Brasília,
is, okay,
que é
you
IX
succeeded in
pequeno.
Brasilia, but that's a
Nós
very
vamos
small
passar por
IX.
outros IX
Are we
antes de chegar
going
em
to
Brasília? Ou
go
seja, nós
through
vamos ter
other
ou
IXs before getting to São
de
Paulo?
Brasília vocês vão para São Paulo?
Or is it Brasilia, São Paulo? We are
Coragem.
already in São Paulo.
É isso, obrigado.
I wish you good luck.
Até eu quero agradecer a
Yes,
toda a
I
equipe
want to
do
thank
X, porque,
the IX team
como você acho que
because,
bem da sua pergunta, é trabalho.
as you implied,
Então,
it's
assim,
a lot
o
of
envolvimento
work.
de toda a equipe para
So the
fazer
involvement of the
migração,
team
para às
for
vezes
the
dar problema, tem que fazer o
migration,
rollback,
you know, when we have
todo esse processo, todo
problems,
mundo
we
operador
have
de rede
to
sabe
take
a
a step
dificuldade
back.
disso.
Network operators know how hard it
Essa
is.
dor que vocês sentem,
And the
a
pain
gente
that
sente
you
também. A
feel,
gente
we
sabe do
feel
problema.
too.
A gente não tá,
We know of the problem.
a gente sabe que o ARP é um problema, a gente sabe
We
que ND é um
know
problema.
that
A
ARP
gente
is a
sofre quando acontece
problem,
algum
ND
problema na
is a
rede
problem.
e a gente vê
And
um
whenever
fluxo de
we have a
unknown traffic
problem
na
in the
rede,
network and you have an
a
unknown
gente sabe que
flood
você
in the
sofre e a gente
network,
quer resolver o problema.
we know that this is a problem for you and we want to solve the problem.
Toda
And
essa história por trás é
all
para
the
atingir São
history
Paulo.
behind
A
is
gente
to
precisa
get to
resolver o
São
problema de São
Paulo.
Paulo.
We have to
Então,
solve the
Brasília foi
problem of
case
São
pra
Paulo.
gente
So
realmente,
Brasilia was a case for us to,
querendo não, por mais que faça laboratório,
you know,
não é a
because
mesma
lab
coisa,
is
tudo
not the
mais,
same. We need real life
mas
experience.
como a gente viu, dá para fazer de
But
uma forma
we
incremental.
saw that we
É o que a gente está
can
fazendo em
do
São Paulo. A
things
gente tem 10%
incrementally,
dos
and this is
Macs
what we are
hoje
doing in
em
São
São
Paulo.
Paulo
We
com
have
EVPN, com
10% of
SRv6,
max
porque dá para
in
fazer incremental.
EVPN because we
Então,
can
eu não
do that
vou chegar
incrementally.
amanhã
So
e
it's
virar uma
not that I'm
chavinha,
going to
opa,
do
todo mundo
it,
está
you
usando
know,
EVPN,
overnight.
beleza.
Oh,
Não é.
tomorrow everyone is
Então,
using VPN.
cada
No.
implementação adicional, a gente
Each additional
tá com o nosso
implementation,
vendor,
each
o
next
pessoal ajudando a gente
deployment,
a entender
we are
problemas
working
que
with the
aparecem.
vendors, trying to
Vai aparecer
understand
problema ruim?
problems
Vai,
because the problems
faz
will
parte,
come.
infelizmente.
That's part of life,
Reforçar então
but that's what we're
parabéns aí
doing.
para toda a equipe
So
de
again,
engenharia do X,
congratulations
mas aí vem
to
uma outra,
IX
eu pensei
engineering
que tem uma outra
team.
pergunta.
And I have
Atualmente
another
nós estamos no
question
barra
then.
20.
Currently, we are with bus 20.
Eu acompanho muito a lista dos X
And
quantidade
I
de
follow the
que a gente usa dentro do
IX
ATM.
list of
Se
what
sente
we
seguro
use
para
inside the
mudar em algum
VPN.
momento esse barra 20 para
Are
barra
you going to
19
change
e a
from
gente ter,
bus
usando
20
esse
to
serviço
bus
aí, ter
19
mais participantes dentro desse
and
mesmo layer 2,
using,
ou a gente chegou por aqui agora no
participants
barra
to
20
have
e é
more
isso?
participants in layer 2,
Eu não
or
vejo a relação,
bus
na verdade.
20 is the limit? I don't see the
problemas
relation.
de camada 2, porque
You
vão ter
have
muito mais
more
Macs dentro
layer
da
2
rede.
problems because you're going to
E
have
aí
a lot
falando
more
dos vendors,
Macs in the network.
que hoje tem
And
que
talking
tratar de
about the
4.000
vendors that
Macs e amanhã
today
talvez de
have to
8.000
address
Macs.
4,000 Macs
Então, mas aí
today,
você fala mais em relação
8,000 Macs
à quantidade de
tomorrow.
ARP e AMD na rede
But
e a
are you
manutenção
talking
sobre
about
Exatamente,
the
porque nós vamos
number
aumentar
of
muito mais
ARP?
por isso que a gente vai estar
Exactly.
focando
That's
na conexão do
why
proxy ARP,
we'll be
proxy ND no
focused
EVPN,
on
porque
proxy ARP
aí essa
and
resolução
proxy
de ARP
ND,
vai ficar local, na caixa.
because then
Então,
the
a gente não
ARP
fica à vontade
solution
agora.
will
Quiser
be
uma requisição de
local,
ARP
and
para
your
qualquer
router,
computador da
anytime
rede,
that there is an
ninguém
ARP
mais vai escutar
request
isso. Só
to
no
any
roteador
other
que vai escutar.
network,
Só onde você está conectado vai escutar.
router
Então,
just
até
where
o
the
próximo passo,
connection
quando eu colocar
is,
isso estaticamente no
we'll be
roteador,
able
até
to
melhor,
listen
porque não
to.
tenho
And if we
nem
have
utilizado
that
a primeira
deployed
aprendizagem na rede.
statically into the
Então,
router,
eu já
even
falei e
better,
coloquei, ó, esse Mac é esse aqui.
because I have
Você não
already
precisa multiplicar a
addressed
rede
to the
no que você não
network
sabe.
that this Mac
Então,
is an IP.
acabou.
And that's
ARP acabou,
it.
ND para a rede toda.
ND and
Obrigado.
ARP are over for the whole network. Thank you.
Oi, Fábio.
Hi, Fabio.
Parabéns, Douglas.
Congratulations. My name is
Parabéns. Uma coisa que
Douglas.
eu queria comentar.
Fala um pouquinho mais alto.
Desculpa, deixa eu chegar aqui. Uma coisa que eu queria comentar, em outras oportunidades a gente conversou.
Previously, when we had a chance to talk,
Na verdade,
I had that
ele
wow
explicou
moment,
ali,
if you know
eu
what I
só pude
mean,
entender depois com a
because
ajuda do
I
ouvinte,
just
que isso aí é
understood
baita de
after
dual stack, mais ou menos
your
equivalente ao
presentation that
IPv4
this
e
is
IPv6 que a
equivalent
gente
to
fala lá na internet.
IPv4,
É baita
IPv6
de
dual
stack que está
stack.
sendo feito
It
simultaneamente
is
ali.
that
Eu
a
em
simultaneous
algum
dual
momento, na minha
stack,
ignorância, eu
kind
fiquei
of
imaginando,
speaking.
será que
And
eles vão colocar
I
uma
was
placa que vai
fooling
converter
myself,
o
thinking that
MPLS daqui
you'd have a box
para
that would
SRv6 de
convert
lá, vai ser um caminho forte. E não,
VPLS
dual stack
to
bem
the
afim.
other one. No, no.
Muito
Now I
bonito
got
e
it. It's a
confesso
dual
pra você que
stack side by
tenho
side.
experiência nisso, mas
And
fiquei
what a
bastante
beauty. I
empolgado a
have no
respeito disso.
experience on that, but I got
Eu tenho,
so
assim, algumas colocações e
interested
a pergunta
in
é
that and
sobre os
very
problemas
impressed.
que
I have a
vocês
question
identificaram
though.
eventualmente em fazer o ARP
Issues
Express, né?
that you
Porque a
had
gente aí sabe de outros casos
identified
que isso
when
acaba
doing
trazendo algumas
the
dificuldades. A gente viu
the ARP
casos de
suppression.
unknown unicast
We
contínuo
have seen continuous
acontecendo
unknown
recentemente e na minha
unicast
cabeça isso é correlato
cases
a essa questão
happening
do ARP Suppression. Eu queria perguntar se é
recently.
realmente isso.
And then my
Tá?
question
Essa é a
is
primeira
that
pergunta, se tem
so?
se esses unknown unicast contínuos
If the continuous
acontecem
unicast
esporadicamente ali, que a gente
which
sabe que é
take
questão de
place
memory,
sporadically,
tá
and we know
correlato
that is a
ao
matter
suppression ou
of
não. E
adjustment,
aí tem uma outra
are they
questão que eu
correlate
queria
one to
perguntar se
another
o
or
EVPN vai
not?
ajudar a resolver.
And if
Que é o
VPN may
BFD.
help us to solve
Hoje a gente tem
some
não o BFD
issues.
com route server.
Not
O
BFD
BFD
with
com
route
route server não resolve nenhum
server,
problema, mas o BFD com o
because
CS,
that solves just
né? O
one
BFD
single
do
problem.
participante com o CS,
But I'm talking about the
porque aí
BFD of the
caiu aquela
participant,
comunicação,
which eventually
treina um Mac
there is a
da tabela
drop in the
e, por
communication.
consequência,
They train
dificultar a malha.
the MAC, and as a
Existe algum
consequence of
trabalho
the
nesse
whole
sentido
mesh,
ou ainda
is
não?
there
Como é que isso
anything
está?
in that sense? Not
Vamos
yet.
por partes aí.
What is the current
Realmente,
status?
seu primeiro comentário
Well, answering
eu
the first part of your question,
várias migrações de tecnologia.
I
Desde a
had
parte
participated
quando o chip
at
era realmente
several
layer 2,
technological
ainda tem o X layer 2,
migrations,
mas
layer
pro
2,
VPLS, agora pro VPL.
IX,
Realmente essa
VPLS,
mudança do layer 2 pro VPLS já
the
me deu
layer 2
essa
change to
dificuldade que você falou, que
VPLS
tem um ponto no meio que faz
had
a
shown
divisão
some
dos mundos. E realmente,
issues.
se eu não tivesse essa
And if I did
flexibilidade no
not
VPN
have
para poder na
such
mesma
a
caixa
VPN
escolher,
flexibility
com
to
você eu falo
allow
VPLS, mas
the
com você eu
same
falo
box,
VPN,
well, I will talk
não ia rolar.
VPLS with you
Ia
and
ser muito
VPN
mais
with
difícil.
somebody else.
Então,
It
é
wouldn't work.
muito
It would be
simples hoje.
much harder. So it's quite simple today to leave one technology to another one and to remove a specific PE from technology. I just go there, shut down my VPN and keep going. If it causes issues, I'll be, in the backup. That gives me same safety to believe that by the first semester of next year, we are going to have a great amount of our mesh in VPN, of our network in VPN. There is no relationship in the unknown, not at all. The use of a VPLS, as large as it is with the number of participants, it requires so much. We are in constant contact with our vendors, so we create cases that guys would never believe their eyes. That's why I say that VPN came to solve our problems and to allow others to survive, because the VPLS work on several tunnels. Or you may see a Mac, but the Mac is not set up to be seen directly, and there is no relation, too much issues. BFD? BFD with C, is that a dream or it may come to reality? Well, it's very difficult because we reach some level of details with those guys. Like, we need this level of position, minor details that are required. And if we add too much, we won't be able to find a device. We started that process in 2016. We are already in 2024. And just now we are doing something about that, because it's really hard to find an equipment which will meet our needs. And to reach something else is hard. I'm not saying that is impossible. You may keep on dreaming, but it's not into our radar right now. EVPN is the eyeballs of is the MPLS of the segment of routing V6. Okay, please, we have to, there is no more time for questions. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Fábio.
Agora eu gostaria de
Next, I would like to invite Peter Wood from Telegeography, who will talk about demands, infrastructures, and pricing, current status of connectivity in the Brazilian market.
Perfeito. Talvez. Obrigado. Vamos esperar. E quando eles perguntam coisa, dá para ouvir aqui? Ninguém sabe usar. Você tem um retorno baixinho, mas você legal, perfeito. Eu imaginei que fosse algo tipo. Eu mandei umas horas atrás, então imagino que sim. Alguém tem, Júlia. Perfeito, já foi. Tá. Ouvi? Tá. Tá, pronta? Tá. Oi, boa tarde, tudo bem? Muito obrigado, X, muito obrigado,
Hello, everyone. Thank you to IX. Thank you, guys. I'm Peter Wood. I work for the Telegeography company. And most of our work, I'm American, right? But today I'm here to talk about the Brazilian market and a topic which connects and relates much of what we are saying here today. And I will share some complementary areas of our field, infrastructure, demands, pricing, and how can that be understood in the Brazilian market, and what is the level of connectivity in this country, which is key for Brazilian development as well as to the Latin American region as a whole. And we have to understand what is the role of Brazil within Latin America and also globally speaking. Connectivity is not isolated, does not work in silos. And Brazil is a great example to show how things are taking place nowadays. Let's start by sub-cables, demand, the main routes, the emergency of connectivities like that, cloud data center, traffic exchange, traffic IP, and which towns are more connected.
Para começar, como é que o Brasil se conecta com o mundo? Claro, obviamente uma pergunta grande, tem vários aspectos em como podemos.
So how can Brazil be connected to the rest of the world? Well, we are from telegeography, we are quite famous, we work on submarine cables, and this is a current map route of all cables. You may search for submarinecablemap.com, where you'll be able to see all current cables connected to Brazil. There are some others which are not being represented here. They are less lightened up, but here you can see cables connected to Brazil. And what's that? First, there are several types of cables connected to Brazil. The worldwide demand type, they vary from one region to another. Most of the connectivities, they take place within the main hubs of the main cities of the country. But much is being changing in the United States, not just in Miami, but also somewhere else in the country. And Brazil is increasing the connectivity and the diversity of connectivities to other continents. With the link from Fortaleza, we may connect ourselves to European countries, to African countries such as Cameroon and Angola. Brazil has always shared or has always depended on the United States, and that has not changed completely, but the role of connectivity in the rest of Latin America is still of great interest of many players. Latin America demand international broadband by region. In Latin America, in the past 4 to 5 years, it represents a typical case in comparison to other regions. We have 35% growth in the past 4 years just in the Latin American continent. If we compare that to more established markets such as the United States and Canada, yet Latin America has a very fast response rate. Conversely, in Africa, in the same time, the conversion rate was 49%. There is regions with less established markets, yet their growth was faster than those more established countries like the US, Canada, but as you know, within each country, we have different regions and we have to respect all the differences and diversities. International broadband deployed in Latin America. 35% is the rate, but worldwide speaking, 33%, 36%. So Latin America has a world representation. However, in Brazil, that was a bit lower. We had amounted 31%. And Brazil follows the same standards. Those more established markets in relation to other markets or regions, the demand increase rate for international broadband used, that was less fast in comparison to other sites with less infrastructure, less competition, and other characteristics. There are sites which implement new technologies with more competitiveness, and anytime we talk about more connected towns, and Brazil is a leader in Latin America, and for that the growth rate, the demand growth rate has more restraints than other areas where those new solutions emerge. How about connectivity infrastructure? Are there any changes? And those changes, they will affect demand as well as other factors. So the cablemap.com shows that there is a chance to change the region and the country with a cable with a huge capacity. Firmina will be ready by few weeks. Firmina is from Google, and it reflects the same standard, which is many cables. They have been planned by the cyberscalers for internal use. That is a different setting than the one we had 10, 20 years ago. But yet in Brazil, we have the Infovia project, submarine cables, but not international cables, as those cables will connect Brazilian regions to the Amazon region. And by next year, we are going to deploy 2 second phases of Infovia, which are the O2 and O4 phases. They will not only increase international capacity in Brazil, but also it will increase and improve quality and infrastructure capacity at different regions of the country, especially those more limited areas with a higher failure risk, with high costs. That is more aligned to federal investment, public money, but also it is within the cable scenario. We have just added all the Amazon River systems in our map. We didn't have that before. Now we not only have sub-cables in the ocean, but also in rivers, being them larger or smaller rivers. And there is a fast-tune cable, which is different from what we already have in Brazil, which would connect Belém to Fortaleza, also with the aim to increase and improve Brazilian infrastructure, such as important major cities connectivities, cities which are connected to other regions of the country and in the globe. Last 2023, we have perceived an increase. Actually, he rephrases 2023 rates had amount 80%. That changes now and then, but it's quite stable. But the type of connectivity and infrastructure per se is being changing. Lately, between 2019 and 2023, the compound growth was of 3%. 33%, I'm sorry, between Latin America and the United States of America. And we see a strength in the connection not only within Brazil, but also to other Latin American countries, as well as to the United States. So mainly that increase in connectivity was between Latin American countries with and to and from Brazil. Brazil has a very important role, and we see 45% growth in the past 4 years. New cables and Firmino, which is this new sub-cable which will connect Brazil to the US as well as Argentina and Uruguay. Interregional broadband. This is another chart which shows how Latin America is connected to the rest of the globe. And Brazil, as I said, plays a very important role in terms of connectivity within the regions. And according to our data in 2023, Brazil had 74 terabytes per second. And in the past 4 years, that has increased to 30%. Now let's emphasize the exchange point of traffic connecting São Paulo to Miami, Florida, US. This is the main route from Brazil to reach international connectivity. There are several cables that are in the coast of São Paulo, close to Santos Harbor, and we have 2 other cables, Junior and Monet. They are the oldest ones, and they are in their last years of their economic life. Commercially speaking, they do not work, or they will not justify continuous usage of the systems. We have some other systems which are suggested to complement those outdated systems. Praia Grande, this is another town in the coast of São Paulo state. And Firmina will get there. Firmina is the new cable system. Malbec, that is also another recent one, and Cibras from 2017. Those 3 cables reaching Santos, they are the newest cables. Now let's talk about pricing. Miami and São Paulo is a very important route to allow international connectivity, not only to Brazil, but to Latin America as a whole. That's why prices are much more competitive for this route, with higher capacity, greater supply, and much fiercer competition, especially in the past decades, where more companies are selling their assets and their capacity building. The green line shows Miami, São Paulo prices, and out of those main Latin America routes connecting to the United States, the cheapest one would be Dallas to Mexico City. This is a terrestrial route, not underwater. And the typical capacity for each one of those contracts are usually 100 giga per second. 400 giga will become regular. We have those 400 gigas already in use at some other markets, but not yet in Brazil. And I guess that Miami, São Paulo would be the route where we would see an increase from 100 to 400. The price between Miami and São Paulo amounted somewhat around $12,000 in the past 3 years. Actually, there was a typo there, so the compound rate has decreased to 24%.
em torno de 15, talvez pouco mais por cento. Isso é uma taxa típica.
Around 15%.
Como mencionei antes, tipicamente,
average.
como demanda aumenta, os preços tipicamente caem mais rápido.
Once there is an increase in demand, there is a drop in prices. Miami and São Paulo is a quite well-established route. Prices are still dropping fast, and we cannot know exactly what is going to be the lowest price. And once we reach a bottom price, what sort of contract will tied up to this new amount. And prices are charged for 10 and 100 giga. But now São Paulo is threefold higher than that, 300 actually. And 3 years ago, that was almost sixfold higher if you compare typical prices for 10 or 100 giga demands. Fortaleza and São Paulo as well. Now, Fortaleza, Miami, New York, and São Paulo, they have similar fees and multiples. With the Firmina cable and some other well-planned projects, content is key for infrastructure, prices, and into the Brazilian market dynamics, because there is significant investment in this country. Here, another submarine cable map showing where content providers invest. For Firmina, Junior, and Malbec, which are the content providers, such as the owner of the cable, or Monet and Tanet, which belong to different entities, several other entities that are part of a consortium, or they are partners, such as Monet. Monet is part of a consortium. And still within our services, this map shows how much that has changed lately. And we have more cables from Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft nowadays than maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Now they see an urgent need to store content, and this is an ongoing demand. For Latin America and Brazil, though, and many at some other interregional areas, content is domains almost everything. But in other regions between the United States, Europe, and Asia, most of the broadband used capacity, it's used for content providers, is still grows, but is not fully domained by content providers. Classic telcos is still, they play a quite relevant role. In 2023, we had 85 terabytes per second used in Latin America by content provider, 85 terabytes per second. And another way of seeing this chart and figures would be the Trans-Pacific and Transatlantic and Trans-Pacific content providers. They domain most of the regions. However, ISPs, they also play a significant role, which is quite obvious. However, that is being changing. The OTT's cables is increasing, although there is not available market, although there is not market availability. But if there is an increase in supply, that leads to a price decrease, because there will be less need to acquire from other companies, and economic strengths, they will, put prices down. In that sense, where is the connectivity heading to? I know this is a quite vague question, but anyhow, cloud. This is the cloud. data center sites and on-ramps in Latin America. And Brazil is in the forefront. Brazil is very important for cloud use. There are 9 cloud regions in Brazil, but with geographically inequality, as they are mainly placed in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro only. And these are highly connected cities. And as to availability zones, AZs, cloud availability, Brazil has much more availability than other countries in the same region. We have around 20 in Brazil, Microsoft, Azure, Google, Huawei, IBM, Oracle, and tenants. On-ramps per city instead of countries or per country. São Paulo is in the top list, is in the top of the list, followed by Santiago, Bogotá. And infrastructure is highly aligned to some other factors, such as local market competitions, where the cloud is, cables, and some other factors that will collaborate to the development of ecosystems where cities will be well connected.
Data centers, we have lots of maps. This map is, no, I don't know, it's not public. It is in our data service, center service. So the map of data centers in Brazil, and compared to the cloud, then the geographic distribution is a bit fairer, so to speak. It's not in the Amazon, but you have data centers in many states. And as we are saying, this is changing a lot. Lots of investments in data center in Brazil being deployed in different parts of the country. And that's important for this change of the scenario in terms of numbers in Brazil. Brazil, the rest of the other regions, the rest of the world, cities. So São Paulo, again, is the main city, and according to our data, there are approximately 58 data centers in the metropolitan region of São Paulo. PTTs are also important exchange points, and the geographic distribution even more impressive. This is public information on our website, and you can take a look at this data with a bit more time. But according to our database, we have almost 200 exchange points in Brazil and in almost all states. And the number of new PTTs per region, and you have other countries, but you see that in Brazil and Latin America has been increasing a lot. Brazil is a large part of the increase. Last year, we had 3 new PTTs, and Brazil is showing that diversity of places where these PTTs are being implemented matters, because again, we need that for more established markets and also for regions that have a smaller history in terms of connectivity. But this is evolving. So what is IP traffic in Brazil like? It's important to mention that we have a service that monitors this information, and we follow the market because this is part of the discussion. I'm going to go briefly through here in terms of broadband and internet in Brazil. Brazil continues to lead the topic. São Paulo is important. Brazil is important in the scenario, and it continues to be so. This year, we saw we had 56 terabytes per second in Brazil, and between Miami and São Paulo, the traffic was 2.5 terabytes per second of average traffic. And in the last 4 years, we saw an increase, CAGR, of 18%. And pricing, the same applies, like the transportation of submarine cables. São Paulo is very cheap compared to other regions. And that has to do with everything that I mentioned before. The typical price that we saw is about 2 times the price of 10 gigas in Miami. 10 years ago, the difference was tenfold. So compared to other markets, the price of IP traffic in Brazil is going to become even cheaper compared to these places. Also important is to take a look at data of who is providing the IP traffic according to the number of subscribers. Our top 5 in Brazil are GGT, Ariel Uruguay, Vital, Lumen, and Telefônica. I don't have much time, but just to close, where in Brazil we have the most connections. In Brazil, we have a new service that searching more connected cities. We use a methodology to get the information. São Paulo, it's no surprise, it is the most connected city in Brazil and Latin America. It ranks 21 in the world, and then Rio, Campinas, and Fortaleza. And the factors we use to determine the score, and if we have questions, we can talk about that. Factors that we use for the monitoring is data centers, PTT, everything that I showed you before, and a few things more like regulation, governance, energy, and etc. So this is a bit of what I wanted to say. I'm not going to read the whole summary, but I thank very much for the opportunity. And if you have any questions, even if it's something that you think I'm wrong, let's talk outside and we come back after coffee break with a solution. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Peter. Temos perguntas para o Peter?
Any questions to Peter?
Rápido, por favor.
Quick questions, please.
Olá, boa tarde.
Hi, good afternoon. Peter, I have a belief, and I would like to understand your take on that and telegeography. In recent years, we had an explosion in the supply of submarine cables in Brazil, and that continues to go on, a lot higher than the real demand that we have. Why do you think this happens? Why do you think we have an excess supply? Is it because it's cheaper? Why don't companies worry so much and have a consortia? Even consortia, do you still have excess capacity? Do you have excess cash? Is it political interests that you don't have to, deal with consortia? So why do you think there is this excess supply capacity and cables continue to come to Brazil without much concern whether the demand is going to be consumed or not? This is an interesting question, because while supply of capacity is increasing more and more, the financial demands have changed a lot. So consortia, for example, are not as common as they were before. And we have more investments from Google and these companies that have a lot of money to invest. So in terms of capacity, I think it is. There are smaller projects that have different sources of funding, but you're talking about different things. You did talk about some examples. It's hard to say if it is Y, X, or Z, but I think it's a combination of factors. And what's interesting, something that we are recently discussing, is telegeography is, thinking of what's coming in the US in terms of governance, and that will affect the whole of the world. In telecommunications and submarine cables, we probably would have more and more regulation to know who is going to manage the launching of new systems to avoid connectivity with China or other threats to the well-being of the United States. And if this is implemented as we think it might, it may add, different layers and times to establish new systems, and also adds costs and perhaps decrease the number of companies that are going to invest in the systems. So there is more to come, more demand, more infrastructure, but we have to know who is going to pay for that. And things are changing based on everything we mentioned before. So now we have a lot of investment in data centers, but everything is connected if you think of it. Leandro from the Federal University. The question is about data centers. What is the metric that you use for the data center map? Data center available for rental? About the map that you showed on data centers? Are these data centers that rent space? What is the criteria used? I don't want to make a mistake, but we have several categories. I can take a look and get back to you. But it's a very complete methodology. We have other maps that show other factors, and we have, more than this map. For example, we can show available space, square meters. So we have different metrics. This is just, to show where they were. Okay, especially for the rental of space, yes. And did you carry any study on demand in different areas? Because the concentrations in maps are for data center spaces, and they are located on a specific meridian, so to speak, the east of the country. And on the west, we have very little. And in Brazil, we have a lot of fiber connectivity. If you think of distance connectivity of fiber, where we should have data centers, we should see data centers in other areas. And we don't. Is that a lack of demand? I think this is the role of our company. When people have the questions, we have data. We don't say you should invest in this market, put a cable here or there, but we show data for people to know if it makes sense and if it supports your idea of investing in the market. So we do have data for everything we do. And we also develop projects that are customized to different companies that want to use our data and our people to answer this kind of question. Thank you very much.
Bem rapidinho, por favor.
Boa tarde, Peter.
Be
Muito
quick.
legal.
Hi, Peter. Very good to see someone from telegeography. I come from Santos. I live in São Paulo. I am a Paulistano by marriage, and I do not see any possibility of fibers getting to the Santos beach because the channel is constantly being excavated for ships to go through. You probably had some questions about that. So Santos, as always, encompasses also Praia Grande. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's not the case of Brazil. In several markets, this is the same. Sometimes, for instance, in the case of Bogotá in Colombia, half of the price is between the capital and where the cables will get. I don't remember the numbers, but it's what you're saying. Yes, but probably in the map, the fibers that are getting to Santos are not getting to Santos. I would risk that you would have to put the dots together and go to Praia Grande because of the ships. The ships would take most of the fibers. Yeah, you remember the new area of research that we are mapping things, of course, to know exactly things are. And we have a new area to map that and not say exactly what the building it is, but what part of city where the cables are coming, because sometimes it's not literally in the city. It depending on the physical geography, it's close to that. And we also do this to show that sometimes you have two places in the same town, and it's important to tell them apart. In the other map says Santos with X cables, but they are not necessarily in the same buildings and not in the same city. But we have a more in-depth information on that. Thank you very much. I come from Banco of Amazonas. I am Ednei Fernandes. Amazon has a huge need of connectivity. We really suffer from that. What do you see in terms of expansions in that region, specifically Pará? That is a very appealing region. Can you speak closer? How do you see the expansion of submarine cables in the Amazon region, specifically in Pará? That is a relatively accessible region, and that would bring a huge expansion of data centers to provide services to the region. Today, we have a huge difficulty to expand our service, especially in the cloud, because our data centers are located too far, and that becomes a challenge for us. These are interesting projects. I do not represent the Brazilian government that invests in the systems, but from the outside, I think there are possibilities of increasing needs. And this is a personal take. I lived some years in Belo Horizonte, but I spent a week in Tabatinga 8 years ago. And I remember I was there, and it took me 20 minutes for an email. And I know that things are changing, but as you mentioned, it is a high difference. So it's not only a financial situation, but it has to do with topology and many things. And we see the same thing in the Caribbean. There are markets that have less demand in terms of end users, less people, and markets do not work as São Paulo and Rio, and then it's a lot more complicated. But it's very interesting to see the final points of the systems connecting. So it's not only Manaus to Belém, but also Belém to the remainder of the country, because that's how the network works. And did you see any technical barrier for this to happen? Or is it just because it's not there yet? Good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know how it will work, but we are really hoping for the best of connectivity for all the regions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter.
Bom, agora a gente vai ter o coffee break.
Now we are going to have our coffee break. We come back at 4:40. We had Peter's presentation now to be an introduction for the panel that we are going to have next. That is going to talk about competition or collapse, the impact of prices on margins and on internet quality. So it's going to be a very nice discussion related to some of the data that Peter brought to us. So 4:40, we'll come back. Thank you very much.
Bom, vamos dar sequência nas atividades. Tá ok? Tá saindo?
Okay, let's move on.
Vamos dar sequência na nossa programação
So
aqui.
let's move on with our first day of our 18th Forum. And now we're going to have a panel that is going to be moderated by Eduardo Parazzo from Duran. So I'd like to invite Eduardo to talk to you. And the topic is competition or collapse, the impact of prices on margins and on internet quality.
Obrigado.
Thank you. Thank you, Julio. Good afternoon, everyone. The good thing is that Julio told me that only those that are here are going to be part of the building VD. But I'd like to call the panelists, Ronaldo Couto, Luiz Balbinot, and Gustavo Barras. Gustavo is getting his headset.
Obrigado, Ronaldo. Luiz, obrigado. Qualquer lugar aí.
No, just take any seat. Make yourselves comfortable.
Também tão longe.
You don't have to be too far.
Hein, Gustavo?
Gustavo?
Obrigado.
Thank you.
Muito bem.
Very well.
Bom, pessoal, a ideia
Okay,
aqui,
everyone. The idea
do painel,
today for the panel is
um
for
entender
us to try and
e discutir
understand
mais
and
como que tá
discuss
indo o
a bit
mercado,
further
A gente tá
how
vendo
the
uma
market is
concorrência muito
doing.
grande,
We
com
see a
excesso até
huge
de
competition,
concorrência na ponta
excess
com o usuário
competition, I
final
would say, at the
ou
front end with end users,
diretamente
or
entre os backbones,
directly
entre a
in
questão de
between
trânsito IP
backbones
e tudo mais.
and
E aí a gente chamou aqui
IP traffic.
algumas pessoas
So we brought
para
some
discutir
people
pouquinho
to
aqui e
discuss
trazer isso mais para reflexão de todos
together
nós.
and
Até que ponto
bring it
essa
for
questão
us, of all
do
of us,
preço e
to
da
think about
competição
it.
não
If
vai atrapalhar os
price and
negócios
competition
no geral
will
e acabar
impair
gerando
businesses
problemas
in
de
the end of the day
margem, problemas
and
de
generate problems in terms
lucratividade das
of
empresas e tudo mais.
margin,
Então eu queria
profitability,
passar
and
aqui
etc.
agora primeiro para o
So
pessoal se
first,
apresentar. Vamos
I'm
começar
going
pelo
to
Ronaldo.
let you
Ronaldo,
introduce
por favor,
yourselves.
faça uma
Ronaldo,
introdução aí sobre você.
a brief introduction.
Obrigado, Parágio.
Thanks, Parajo. Good afternoon, everyone.
Eu sou o Ronaldo Couto.
I am Ronaldo Couto.
Provavelmente vocês,
Probably
alguns de vocês, né, já
some of
têm
you
um
already
treinamento de fibra
had
ótica, uma parte de
training
FTTH
on
comigo.
optical fiber
Eu comecei a
networks
acompanhar os
with
provedores,
me. I
Parágio, em
started
2009,
working with
e
providers in
todos eles só tinham
2009
rádio, né?
when
E
all of them
colocar o
had
primeiro
radios
metro de
only.
fibra na rede era um
So
grande
have the first
desafio.
meter of fiber in the
Então eu
network was a
tive o
challenge.
prazer de
So
poder
I had the
ajudar
pleasure
bastante
of
provedor Brasil afora
helping lots of
a começar
providers
as suas
throughout
redes
Brazil to start
eu
their
sempre digo que
networks.
é uma
And I
felicidade a
always
gente ver
say that
hoje
I'm very
aonde eles chegaram,
fortunate to see
né?
today
Mérito, obviamente,
where
é
they
deles,
got
né? A
to.
gente apontou o
It's all
caminho e
their
eles
merit. We
trilharam e
showed
fizeram
the way
acontecer.
and they made it
Então é isso,
happen.
gente.
So that's
Nesses
it.
anos todos, como
Throughout the
treinamento,
years with
consultoria,
training,
a gente
consulting
vê bastante
services,
de como funciona, não é?
we
O provedor
see
internamente
how
e a gente pode
providers work
observar que
internally,
alguns pontos a
and we
gente pode
can
melhorar,
see that
né?
there are
É
points
claro
for
que a gente já
improvement
fez muito,
sometimes.
mas a
Of
gente
course,
ainda tem
we've
alguma
come a
coisa
long
ainda
way,
para
but there is
aperfeiçoar
still
e
some to
melhorar os
do
resultados.
to get better and
Obrigado,
better
Luiz, por
results.
favor.
Thank you, Luis. Thanks for the invitation of the panel. The subject is very interesting. I have always worked with the internet. I started in 95 when internet started to be explored commercially in Brazil, when the first loops started to be sold, 64K from Embraer, and I have been working with that ever since. I went through it all, dialed internet, then radio, then fibers, to what we have today. I come from a time where we had IPv4 for everyone. Now we have IPv4 for no one. At the time, and this is interesting information, IPv6 is turning 29 years old, IPv6, and we are still, struggling to install it. I've always been very active at universities, research groups. People know that I'm always there, like NIC, Fórum, all conferences, VPS. If there is someone talking about technology and network, you'll find me there. So this is a topic that I'm really interested in. Thank you, Gustavo. Well, thanks, Edu, for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am Gustavo Barros, founder of IP Investments. Our focus is mergers and acquisitions, so we raise funds for providers to grow. And we eventually can sell 100% of providers that are closing their cycle, partners without succession plans that want to monetize what they have built. So we started in the segment in 2016. In 2016, we had a transaction with WBC Networks that belongs to Vanderlei, and he opened the doors to my company. So the first customer was Solicit in 2017. And we brought people from IB Capital. And since then, we had more than 73, 74 transactions of sales and raising funds to internet providers. I am an economist from INSPER. The former IBMEC of Paulo Guedes. And before working with telecom, I worked with software technology. I founded a company in 2013, and we have been following the evolution of the segment of internet providers. So between 16 and 17, many providers were starting with fibers, and we had a quick payback of several cities and projects. So people were not selling fibers. People were being bought. So providers took orders. There were wait lines, low competition, and the links were a difficulty, infrastructures was a difficulty, fibers were very expensive, access to financing was for very few. So it was a quick evolution, and I think it's going to be very interesting to discuss the topic. So I will really try and contribute to the panel. Great. The idea was to call this team to discuss what's going on in the market today. Today, we see a market that has excess competition. You see places in São Paulo, for instance, that have in a single building 6 to 7 internet companies, completely different to the scenario Gustavo mentioned in the beginning, where there was a shortage of infrastructure and technology. And now you see a fight. People just, trying to get customers from the other, trying to get customers from the others, a churn of customers that is huge. And more, we see, and I'm going to use a topic that Ronaldo used, it became a spiral, and I think that everybody is going down the drain. So the idea for this discussion was exactly that, to start talking a bit about the future, because if we continue in a process of providing more capacity with lower prices, where is the productivity go? And so Gustavo is here to talk a bit about this. Ronaldo also to talk a bit about his consulting experience and Balbino experience on backbones and ISP, which I believe is another challenge because providers have very low prices for end users and then fight their vendors. So this is something that is getting more and more difficult, especially when we see the market and we think of the need of investment that the business needs. We are in an industry that is capital intensive for people to renew technology and expand. So the first question goes to Ronaldo. Ronaldo, considering the current scenario and your experience, since you know the first ladders on electricity posts, how do you see the current scenario, the competition that is quite predatory, a very difficult situation, and there is a case that is even more complex, in my opinion, which is those providers that are working in the market but illegally. That is, they are not paying for the lamppost, they are not paying for their taxes, they are not paying for the infrastructure they are using. So, from the projects that you have experience with, how do you see the situation and where we are right now? Oh, that was an excellent question. It's almost a dissertation. Well, if you know me, you know my answer. It depends. And everything depends on something. Yeah, just kidding. When I got from Moreira the name of the panel, competition or collapse, I started thinking whether I was going to say that we are in a competition or we are already collapsing. And I came to the conclusion that we are collapsing. Not collapsing the internet provider business itself, but the business model that we have had until today, the way we offered internet services through band, differentiation almost zero. So it was either more band or less price to get the customer. But you invest so much to get the customer that you forget to invest to protect your customer base. So we are at a time that is very important because we have to rethink everything. We have to rethink how we offer internet services to customers, to leave the binomial band and price, because this is actually strangling our business. And for that, we have to think more and more about innovation. I think this is the first point. So competition is positive in this way. We will need more and more to think how we can provide good services to customers. Now, services is not necessarily higher band capacity. We have to think about offering to customers a better experience.
And this experience has to be noticed in every single step of the relationship, not only at the sales time, neither during support. I like to emphasize and reinforce that today there are still many providers who believe that their customers just want to have a good support, but it's exactly the contrary. The customers, they do not want to require any support, because if they have to ask for any support, it means that they are having a bad service quality with their internet services. If we start from the premises that a client needs support that requires more people working at the support department with more main force, and that will require more investment on personnel and less money for investments. And then I will end up buying products and equipments of bad qualities that will lead to a request and demand for more people, and then I will end up spending more. So it's high time we understand that our clients, they are not willing for support, and to avoid support, good investments, less support, fewer people, more money left for additional investments. This is the insight that we should all pursue. We are going through some sort of collapse. If we do not reinvent this model, we won't be able to keep on growing in this sector. Very well stated. And your comments, they just rang a bell. And I include myself as a provider. We have to provide a good service, a service of excellence, I mean. And it's exactly the opposite. Customers, they do not want to ask for a good support, but rather to have a great service which will avoid the need for further support. Once a customer has any problem, of course, I have to be there and offer the best service ever, but that should not be our focus. Our focus rather is I have to supply a very stable network, as stable as possible. Many still think that if a client changes provider, they do that for price. Wrong. Price is the fifth reason for a client to replace a vendor. First, network instability. If you have a good support, but instability is still there, what for? Well, and the instability is a Wi-Fi problem or the guy's equipment, which is really bad quality. Anyhow, let's get back to the backbone issues and high network investments to cope with the infrastructure, which is the provider's back office. In your experience, this price aggressiveness, how do you see that? Or equipment prices are following such a drop to try to balance up the business? What is your take? You experience large networks all over the territory. Well, prices, they are not following, they never follow, there is an imbalance. And we see a much narrow number of vendors. We are at vendors' hands for so long because we don't have enough vendors in our market. But if you gain a client due to price, well, that vendor will need to reduce their costs to deliver the promising bands, which changes the value, the amount that providers want to pay per traffic. Many years ago, we didn't have a CDN. International traffic was violent and fierce because we would require and depend on international backbone. Only IP prices were so high, we were experiencing a monopoly. But later, once the OTTs came up, the market was more open, and sub-cables, they are all launched by the OTTs. So international dependence is no longer a problem. But if we think about a country like Brazil, which is the largest country in the world of Portuguese speakers, it doesn't make any sense to have a Portuguese outside Brazil. Someone will access, I understand, but the main usage is over here in our territory. Therefore, there was a huge concentration of content. And today, a provider who is really well organized and know exactly where to get the traffic from, they are able to get their traffic direct from the source, which is excellent, especially from support perspective. Before I would contract a service and a user would call me complaining about not being able to access the website of electronic invoices. Then I would have to ask for another operator to get that call, and that would take so long. Today, we are rid of that. We get traffic. In a first instance, I know how much band I have. I will not have any issues to get Google's traffic. There will be no bottlenecks. Before, 2 or 3 years ago, when we had Embratel and Brazil Telecom as telcos, they wouldn't talk one to another. They still don't. And they would have a strangled link between the two of them. What could we do? Nothing, just sit and cry, because the only way was to get their own link, and no one wants to keep on paying for OTT's traffics. Yeah, but come on, let's, stick out of that, otherwise we would be here until tomorrow. Okay, going back, how can providers be able to charge a price which is affordable? Today, it's almost impossible to a provider to have two view tools to know exactly where the traffic is coming from in such a way that they will have a more accurate engineering about the interconnection. How can I tell if I need to interconnect with the Meta? If they have no tools, they have to work blindness. So a good view tool is necessary. Someone who is in São Paulo is fine. You can get all the necessary content if you are around here, São Paulo, but there are some other hubs, such as Porto Alegre, Rio, and Fortaleza. A provider has to get the greatest number of interconnections free of charge and to become less independent of traffic providers. What do we still get by traffic today? Things that cannot be in Brazil due to adverse reasons, such as UPTV, IPTV, and other type of content that would not be permitted in this country. Whatever is left would be main attack. Otherwise, we are really well served by the content that we get from providers. And we see nowadays traffic being offered below 1 BRL per megabyte, which would not be, reasonable some time ago.
Não posso me dar o luxo nem de comprar capacidade.
I cannot even dare buying capacity. I need to have my own network, my own swap. I won't be able to reach content like that as I am not able to afford them. Let me ask you a question, Gustavo, for some additional reflection. If I have a PPT which I paid 99 BRLs for 500 mega, and I'm trying to transfer those same 500 mega for 100 BRLs. I'm trying to take that mega price for that amount. So, you know, that does not work because we have to consider equipment, transportation, all the logistics. The cheapest connection in the world is the Brazilian IX. What it would cost, a 10 gig or 100 gig portal abroad is not comparable to any other IX abroad. If you connect to an international IX in Europe or in the US, you may pay $10 for 1 giga portal. And in the best case scenario, $1,500, and some will even charge $3,000 to connect to their IX, plus the brand cost, plus transportation. So with that, Brazil is in the forefront. It represents an advantage with a well-distributed IX structure throughout São Paulo, Rio, Fortaleza, and many other PPTs, which had helped us to reduce costs. But how come that the price that you have at one end should be the price to be charged at the other end? Don't they realize that that may end up impacting the quality of the service they are offering? 1 mega of traffic, will that be worthwhile? That will offset the whole thing, or wouldn't it be able to connect to or with someone who has invested on monitoring infrastructure to allow a acceptable, more than acceptable quality? Would that work or what? There are providers that they buy cheap products from a fake providers. If I want to avoid international traffic, but people, they don't realize that they end up paying more for looking for cheaper options, because you have to know exactly which traffic you would like to get from. Am I willing to connect to Europe, United States? Now China is also in the game. So not all IPs are the same. IPs are commodities, but from a transit perspective, it works differently. Let me just raise a fact here, which is, if we think about a carpenter plant to make a nice table, to have a nice table, you need to work on good wood. I like wines, and you can just drink a taste wine if you have a good fruit beforehand, I mean the grapes. And sometimes we want to deliver an internet service based on a bad raw material. People, they fool themselves and they think a bad raw material is enough to deliver a good internet service. But raw material is everything. If I want to have internet of quality, how can I not, emphasize that enough? Is still along the same lines of Bob and Ronald. You have had a number of operations, mergers, acquisitions, investment clubs, and groups of investments. First, we have to consider a EBITDA analysis. If we consider profitability, they are looking for profits, but they need money to invest and to expand the business. How can we close that equation if we bring prices if you bring the prices down. The average ticket was what, 150 before. What is the average ticket that we have nowadays? Is there any margin left? What is your opinion about that? Is there a drop also in the way they value that market, and the market is suffering exactly because of the price that people are asking for at the negotiation table? Once prices go down, it's very hard to get them back again. And since 2017, we have perceived an average ticket drop, and around the south and southeast region, that is around 90 and 100 BRLs. The northeast region, though, they cannot be so aggressive. We have to consider their income, and with that, their average ticket is quite low as well. But prices go up. We have a number of readjustments in energy, salaries, but that cannot be passed back to the end user, to your client. Everything becomes more expensive, but we cannot charge that in our final price. We people, individuals, we pay for so many bills, and all those bills, they are charged in dollars because of their products. They are imported most of the times. And while people don't understand, or vendors don't understand, that the best thing is to keep their margin then and stick to their old customers and not looking for new ones. And there are no new clients with the pandemics. What we would expect to happen in 3 to 4 years, it happened in 1 year only. Those that would grow 10% yearly, they grew 150% in 1 year. And now, if they reach something closer to 10%, that is already a miracle. You should be more than happy, as the majority, they grow around 5 to 8% annually. Telcos 1 to 2% annually, which is not enough to cover all costs, because we have expenditures, and if you bring down your revenue, you end up flattening down your margin. Let's say a developer, an operator that is doing fine today, they might be reaching 40% of operational profits. And what is left? 20%. 20% should be kept for investments, exchanging technology to improve customers' experiences, because if you don't have a compatible level of technology, you will not offer a better experience to your cycle, which will end up leading to all that negative experience, more support, more costs, and then they would invest 20 and 10% is left for their shareholders. And by decreasing your average ticket, profitability will go down as well, and there will be less money to be invested, and you will end up buying equipment of lower quality, adding to more support, and a very negative dynamic cycle. Telco is a long-term investment where we also have just a long-term return over the investment. And we cannot think about the level of competition that we have today. The competition is extremely high nowadays, leading to the type of collapse that we are all going through. People searching for cheaper vendors. And as we all know, there isn't, and people that work with traffic, which is not even local, not allowing a good experience to their end users. And that is not just bad for users, but for the market as a whole. So, putting prices down is not the best option, in my opinion. There are other differentials that may help reducing support, improving customers' satisfactions, and to allow customers to understand that there is a differential to stick to that provider, maybe because it's a new VLAN, a new OTT, a different MVO or app that will add some sort of differential to the business. And then maybe annually they will be able to charge some extra in their final price. But that, unfortunately, is not what we usually see in the market.
Do you think that there is indebtedness going on for these providers? Because you pressure margins, then you have no longer money to invest. So what do? You raise money to continue investing. In your analysis, do you see a growth in indebtedness? And obviously, it's no magic. Indebtedness at the level of interest rates that we have in Brazil with the Selic rate can be a mortal trap. Do you see lots of people that are taking debt, are raising debt to have capacity of investment and grow, and having this, to pay in the future? Certainly, from 23 to 24, there was almost a hangover, so to speak, especially with the main distributors, WTC, Quora, because they offered credit for providers to work in greenfield projects. They were not able to have a payback. That's the reality. You're going to get customers that no one wants. So you're going to make investments considering hardware and services, installation of 800 to 1,000, 1 year free of charge to customers. So it does not stand. So we did have a hangover of people that took too much debt and had no return to pay back the vendor or the bank. So now we are going into an even greater problem. Those providers that are already stable but have poor margins are taking the little credit in the market for capex, just to keep and defend their customer base. And quite often they are not able to do so. And even if they are, with indebtedness today connected to the Selic rate, it is just another premium. And Selic is going to hit 15, 16% next year. I think that's a given. If you take a look at this last coupon meeting, it will get to 15, 16 next year, plus premium. So they're going to pay 20, 22% interest rates for a business that is unfeasible. So the collapse is coming. I think the major consolidators that are listed companies that have a huge leverage, except for Unifique, others are close to the limit. There is no more room for money to buy someone or to make investments in new technologies. So we are going to have, in my view, two very bad years for the segment. Those that are better prepared are going to be able to survive, in my opinion, and perhaps gain some market share. And those who are not will either have to consolidate or leave the market. We've seen that happen before. Again, 15,000 ASNs, it's not feasible. So my advice is for everyone to get ready and do their homework as soon as possible, if you haven't, to try and stop losses. It's better not to have a new customer and just have a more loyal base with products, with differentiated equipment, with some kind of benefit for your customer base and have loyal customers. I don't know if I start crying. I think I'm going to wait until the end of the panel, but anyway, when I proposed the idea of the panel was to bring a financial, technical view, a consulting view. And I always have this concern at Abranet or at my own company working the market. We see this huge fight to bring prices down. And I've always said that, uh, when I talk to people, I say, be careful. You are going to take money out of the table and you are bringing, trouble to you. I would like to hear Ronaldo, because since the beginning of Abranet, I've always said the following. Let's share. I see Maya, and Maya is someone who's always been with us. And I said, let's share. Why 10 companies building in the same place? Why 30 companies being in the same place? Why can't we share? And today we are talking about neutral networks that are coming up, but still very concentrated in some places. So do you think this is a way out? Companies, providers starting to sit down together and unite, perhaps see what they can add to the other, not necessarily a merger, but perhaps looking at the market in a better way, understand who competitors are and who partners may be. Because if you take a look at CETIC's study, 70% of households are already connected somehow. This is what you said. But you still have a growth rate evolution, not as much as we had in the past, in the pandemic, because everybody thought that the pandemic was going to be the new normal from now on, and it was not. And then, people went crazy making investments and fiber here, fiber there, because there were lots of customers. Indeed, the pandemic brought in a year a change of paradigm to our lives and also for our business of providers with a huge volume. But do you think this is a way out? Perhaps people starting sitting down together and try and understand how they can help one another, and perhaps even, I don't know, look inside and knowing what they are trying to do, sometimes just bringing customers, but perhaps new customers are not necessarily profits. They may be a loss to the business because you're talking about a cost of investment of 800 for activation. You are selling at 100. If it's 1 year free, it's gone. I mean, there is no profit. And if they leave before the end of the year, it's a huge loss. What do you think, Ronaldo? Do you think this is a way out? This is a possibility? It is a possibility, Parachas. When we think about shared networks, the idea of neutral, I have questions, yeah. Neutral peronomútil. Yeah, neutral but blurred. But anyway, but it is a way out. We have examples in some cities, customers that I know that got together, five, six competitors in the same town, and they built a single network and they use a single network. So they compete for the customers, but the network is the same. And that brings a relief in terms of capex, of course. However, we have to be careful with that too, because when you do the math, and you have all the calculations of a project, 20 to 25% is network, 70% is customer activation. So thinking that a neutral network will solve all problems is wrong. Because if I want to continue growing at an accelerated pace, I will need huge cash flow to keep activating customers. So this is something that we have to pay attention to. So you have to pay attention to your margins. Yes, because if there is no margin, and it is what Gustavo mentioned, then you're going to jeopardize your cash flow. And your level of investment is not even CapEx, it is customer activation, which is CapEx, but it's not quite. So we have to be careful not to just say, oh, neutral networks are away. Not necessarily. And another thing that I would like to say is the following. First, even if we do have a neutral network, if we don't improve the way we relate to our customers, we are not going to have customer loyalty. What do I mean by that? Get crazy. I think that's the word. Sometimes you go to the customer, and the only thing you do to make sure that their work is good is to teach your customer measure speed. But speed does not guarantee good experience. So instead of explaining to customers how they can have good experience, I teach them how to measure speed. And when they call and the speed is low, I complain. I say, all my customer wants is to know about speed. Well, who taught them? So we have to talk to customers and understand. If I'm getting a customer from another competitor, why has the customer decided to come to me? This is the first question. What motivated you to hire my services? What the competitor did wrong for me not to do the same? And we are not concerned about that. So I think this is something we have to invest more in training our technicians, our sales force, and this is something, yes, the sales force perhaps is even the most complicated case. Yeah, we have Rogério here. It's extremely complicated, but sales people, installation staff, and services. Very quickly to turn to Luis, I recently had a case. I live in São Paulo, and I had to change operators because I was 1 week without services, and operator A was not going to solve my problem. So I called and said, I want to cancel the service. And the lady said, just give me a moment. Why do you want to cancel? And I said, because I haven't had internet services for a week. 1 minute. When she came back, she said, Sir, I got a plan of 50 reais for you. And I said, thank you so much, but is it going to work? Because my problem is not the price, is that it doesn't work. But you are a differentiated customer because a customer that, that perhaps wouldn't care much would say, okay, I'll go for 50. But that's why we have to train our people, because I had 2 or 3 protocols saying that the internet was not working. The least she could do was to read my history and say, oh, I'll give you priority. Internet's going to work tomorrow. So companies, I'm talking about 2 operators, but I saw example with larger providers. Companies are killing their margin without the need because they don't train their people. I heard from an operator, a service call center operator, that a lady called saying that Global Play was not working, and she paid a bit more for that. So she wanted to downgrade her plan. And the girl said, okay, we have all these plans for you to choose. Which one did she choose? The cheapest. Now, you ask her, why didn't you try to understand the problem and keep the price as was? And she said, because my service time was going, my call time was going to go up. So you understand that we are making some options that are complicated. And then we say, oh, we have a poor margin. Yeah, unfortunately, users have as the main assumption price and band. That's what they care for. I want more band with a lower price. This is the assumption, but we trained them to do that. Okay, Luis, this week I talked to a provider. He said, we no longer have a support area. We have a retention area because, they want to understand the problem. And I think this is what you're saying, Ronaldo. When you understand the problem, you don't give away margins or prices. But people just want to know the service time. Keeping the customer is very important. These are the KPIs that we should look into. Yeah, because some customers, they don't want to cancel. They want to solve their problems. It's part of the call. I don't have much to say. I have a history that I started working at a project in the south of Brazil, which was 27 providers that got together, 27 providers that got together to save. And in the end, for several reasons, the group set apart. But today we see smaller providers to get together to have cash from Google, servers from Facebook. So it's good. The very small players, people that cannot go to Barueri and get a PNI from Google. And we know, the MacGyvers we have in the field to justify cache bans. So people get together to do this kind of thing. And there is not much sharing in terms of fibers, but the government does not meddle with it. But in France or Spain, they have a very strong intervention. You have to share. But here it is what it is. We see people getting together, sometimes to buy traffic, volume, get a better price. There are lots of these things, and we see it all. A customer announcing blocks from other customers, using the AS from the other. So people do that to bring down costs, but there is no miracle. I think the prices are so low that now we are talking about cents of difference. And the cents of difference are not going to reflect on the final equation. It is what Ronaldo mentioned. I talked about sharing and get together, but Ronaldo said, if my operational costs continue to go up and my prices go down, my margin is going to be tight. I might have a little margin here or there, but at the end of the day, I'm sorry, the result is not going to be much difference because they are not going to reduce activation from 800 to 100. You have labor, you have installation team. So in the end of the day, you're not going to be able to do that. Now, Gustavo, thinking of the whole scenario, and perhaps not such an inviting scenario for the future, or not as appealing for the next 1 or 2 years. Do you think it's time that people wake up and really start thinking about having fairer prices that can enable them to provide good services to customers and at the same time recover margins a bit? Because overnight we are not going to be able to increase prices only. You know, in the next 5 minutes, we can even talk about the tax reform when it hits everyone. And this is going to be a whole new world. So SVA, be able to have, you know, a financial balance, tax strategy. With the reform, this is dead. But do you think it's time for people to take action, to think where we are and whether we are sustainable for the long midterm? I think it's high time. In my view, it is what I said. Prices were knocked down. It's very hard for them to come back. But coffee is up, pasta is up, fruit is up, meat is up, beer is up. And now wine is going to be up because of more taxes. So that's a problem.
Well, and that shouldn't be necessary because they are part of our daily use. Today, in another group, people were talking if they should have an increase in the monthly payment or the plan. And then I suggested that we should start from the really boring clients. If they leave us, that's not a problem, you know, then we can have an idea how the rest of the customers will behave. We have to do a very detailed analysis, try to step out of this fight for tickets prices, as it's much easier to keep with your own clients, to retain clients who are with you for so long, than getting new ones, especially those that nobody else would like to have in their portfolio. So I think it's a matter of being able to advocate for our own bases and to allow a better perception about what we do. And if you are able to keep your margin, you are already in a win-win situation because you are going to have a reasonable income profit. We are in a very competitive market. If you want, I think the minimum is to pass the IPCA tax. If you do that, you are adding value to your service. More than that, I think is nonsense. Real price increases, I don't think it's going to work. But at least to add IPVA taxes to reduce churn, reduce losing or stop losing your clients, I think this is key. And forget about fighting for prices and rather add a better service experience to your customers. You don't see the large ones trying to steal clients from the smaller companies because their prices are quite aligned to the rest of the market. Well, there were two different things here. When they were above their price and smaller providers, they would knock down prices, but they were still, you know, in a certain level. And we see those crazy guys, crazy vendors who would like just to sell for 50 BRLs. But I understand you are talking about those that have money to pay and to see who resists longer. If you have money, let's see who can still keep the O2 like apnea. You cannot stay too long diving without breathing. So it's more or less the same. Let's see for how long people will be able to last for. And just to close this discussion, we are always pointing out to average tickets. but not quite. That shouldn't be. Okay, one of the factors is the average ticket, but not only EBITDA is another one, is another factor, and we have to understand the profit per client. What is the profit that I get by each one of my clients? Even if I increase the prices or if I add IPCA tax, I still can work on my efficiency because our efforts, fine, if we are able to increase the prices, fair enough, but we also have to do our best to improve our operating effort. If we do that, we are going to have more profit.
Todo mundo já está começando a olhar feio para a gente, que acho que eles estão querendo pro qual que é o próximo agora? É o Gear in Gear, não?
So we are just this session is before the beer and gear, and people are getting kind of anxious because they're feeling like, you know, moving to the happy hour, I guess.
Eu acho que talvez seja melhor fazer esforço hoje.
I would suggest working hard today with your clients, doing the best service to them, talking about the price to be charged and keep them in your portfolio. It's probably the smartest thing that any one of us should do. And I also would like to hear from you in the audience. Are there anyone still in the development phase? Just one person? Two? Anybody else? Really few people. So this lesson has been learned. Let's stop spending money useless, because that is not a good business. I usually tell in my training sessions that if people if you like to build up networks, you should close that business and start building work on construction.
Os que aparecem na televisão no horário nobre, né? E agora perdeu os clientes assim por
It took so long to get our customers' confidence. Why should we lose them for nothing? So this is the home take message. Can we now open for questions, comments, anything?
Klaus.
Yes, we have a comment. Cost reduction. We are not able to reduce costs in the IP portal. Routers, they are extremely expensive and they keep on increasing prices. I understand that the price increase doesn't have to do with the manufacturer, but the components which all increase and the equipment ends up being more expensive, as well as the cost per megabyte, which is more expensive as well. When developing a network, we try to reduce costs with NPLS with a lower cost, and also to take the transmission based on ZR Plus for transmission cost reduction. Some solutions that we have available in the market, unaggregated routers. There is just one manufacturer for this type of router. So a solution which is not quite a solution, to be honest. And one final comment about neutral networks. Luis might recall back in the year 2000, we were working with a wired connection, land connections, and that company no longer exists, but at that time they lost all their clients to a neutral network. That was a while ago, 25 years. I worked for a provider like that who has lost all their clients' database. So be careful with the contracts to be signed with your neutral network provider so you don't get caught by an incident like that. Equipment acquisition price in a middle run, we are still paying X 1,000 US dollars for the equipment, but with a higher capacity, 400 and now 800 gigabytes. So probably the cost-benefit analysis per megabyte will drop in their cost, but the price is still charged in US dollars, and the conversion rate to our BRL is quite high. We have to multiply by 6. And we also have to pay for licenses, paying licenses to international companies, and you know, this money goes down to the drain. I would like now to give an end user perspective from corporations or individuals. It's key to give enough safety to end users and the best customer experience ever. Anyone will prefer to pay a bit more if they have a guarantee that that service will work continuously without any breakage than trying to decrease the prices with different vendors. There are those clients who are always willing to pay less until they get it for free. But now with all home office and remote work, people prefer to have more safety in their internet connections. I don't come from this area, I come from the Amazon region, and I have 2 links at my place. One to allow me connectivity if I am working remotely. I will be sure that I will have efficiency in addition to the 5G, which does not always work. But from an enterprise perspective, and now on the hat of an end user, some providers, they do not interact with IT companies to which they are offering their services. I think a deeper relationship should be necessary, because it's more like I give in the link, you supply it, and within 4 or 5 years we are going to get a new contract. But now with all the internet dynamics, we have to keep on working and implementing. So the interaction between enterprises and customers in a consultative manner, like talking, discussing, your traffic is going through some problem, shall we take a look? So you remove that bad user experience and you exchange that for a much better experience, because my provider had notified me in advance. That brings teams much closer one to another and also increases customers' loyalty. Thank you. Ronaldo, anything else?
Não, está perfeita a colocação do colega.
I agree.
A gente sempre fala em como se diferenciar, né?
How can we differentiate ourselves in the market? And connectivity per se is not just a way to make a difference in the market to our users. To deliver a broadband to the door of my customer's house or office is not a way to guarantee a good experience. I have to be there inside their premises and then be able to understand what they are facing and together offer the best experience ever. Yeah, the thing is if they are willing to pay for the fair price.
Veja, o preço é fator relevante na
price is a relevant factor.
Hipocrisia se a gente falar que o preço não importa nessa equação.
If I say that price is not a matter, I would be I would be silly, but it's not just a matter of price. Price is indeed a relevant factor, but not the only one if there is not a good experience behind it. One final question, two more. My name is Moacir. I also come from the North region. I live in Belém, or I used to live in Pará State, Belém City. How do you see competition in the northern region, especially that next year is going to host the COP30? And we are talking about countryside areas, remote, rural areas. How do you see this sort of access, not just getting connectivity to the main capitals, but also to the rural areas? Well, we do need demand. Just a goodwill to serve the region is not enough. COP30, many people behind the scenes doing things, you know, to connect the region. I don't believe people will build up infrastructure and remove it after the event is over. No, that would be silly. But this is a region where there is no further investment because there is no additional demand. If there would be some sort of content, a secret content that everybody would need to go over there to pick it up, there would be a reason for additional connectivity. But just like Manaus is a very difficult region, we have had bad experiences. Any large size event like COP, COP, or any other will help to take infrastructure or to improve infrastructure. But the question is there any potential? Is there demand for that? Are there clients? The city of Manaus or the city of Belém, indeed, we are going to find more competition in this more central area. But if we talk about connecting long distances, it's difficult to say that you are going to make it feasible or to have funds to take connectivity to rural areas, like Starlink, that today has over 250,000 clients just in Brazil. And how come? Because they have a low orbit satellite with a good latency quality, and it's working. There is income there. But again, even down here in the countryside of the state of São Paulo, the main cities, they are really well served, even exceeding competition. But if you go a little bit outside, it's, you know, the situation gets worse. We just have 4 minutes left, and then we have to close the session. Good afternoon. I am CEO of AUP project companies, AP project companies in São Paulo.
Mas vem acontecendo uma coisa que está afetando muito, né, a questão da competitividade.
Competition is affecting many other companies. Those companies which they comply with the regulation, and as they don't have a competitive price, they have to remove their assets, or at least pretend they are removing them to look for more competition. And my opinion is lack of equality in competition, which is not regulated similarly to all, is what differentiated the competition to a collapse. The state neglects that, allowing prices for those who do not pay for their infrastructure ends up being the easiest way to promote their products. And those who work properly according to the law from finances or clients' perspective, they are hindered or jeopardized by the system.
E não criando diferenciais no seu produto.
And price is essential and not a differential. It's an unfair competition. That's what you mean in a nutshell. Exactly. We, from different associations, we have to keep on fighting for that, to work on fairness. It's useless to pay for taxes and compared to some other one who is not paying for their expenditures. Yes, competition is very complicated, and unfortunately. At that, although all of that interferes to a number of other actions, because we have a tax load and a need for regulation, whereas there are many others who offer 69 and you cannot, cover that price because we have to pay for taxes. We have a number of things to cover, whereas others, they are working unfairness. So they are promoting illegality and unfairness. I share your feelings, and associations, they exist to improve that. I don't know if I will be still alive the day that will be over, but there are some guys doing their best for that. And one final insight before we close. Have you ever seen anywhere a provider like that becoming a market leader? No. So let's think over. There is not one city that will, accept a company like that or a provider like that to be a market leader. So we have to take that insight seriously. There is a complication, we agree, but there are other constraints, and just market leadership says that this is a healthy company. Small, medium-sized companies or providers may also work and perform not being a market leader, but with an affordable structure. That's exactly what we are after. I'm not saying that all companies will fight for leadership, but to offer fair products with fair prices. Yes, I agree, but what I'm saying is we cannot say that that competitor action is the one responsible for jeopardizing ourselves, as others were able to reach leadership, even with others being the bad guys or being unfair. So that's my 2 cents. We have not just to worry about our competitors and forget about ourselves. Let's, look to our own company and mainly to our customers. We have to become experts to read our customers' expectations. Okay, I agree. Okay, thank you, everyone. Do you still have a question? Moreira, he's making faces to me. It's over 6. The Amazon region and the Pará state, they both have demand for connectivity. We have just 8% of connection in Roraima, 14, Amazon 16. We are almost in the dark without connectivity right now at this moment. But my question to you is, connected north region and some the Infovia fiber is activated, the 001 fiber is being activated as the consortium for the 12 companies. They do not work with the same resources, but one will depend on the other one.
Well, I think that's for you. I cannot say much, but the Infovia project from start, lots of people joined, then gave up. Even for us that are part of it, we do not have the use for network there, our own use. People who are there are betting on future demand. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not the person that can say, let's go into the project because in 2, 3 years' time, we are going to have 5G in the whole region and we are going to need more connectivity. What I know from my area is that I have no assets there. And to me, I really don't know. Because they are both operating with different teams and different management, I think it doesn't make much sense. You would have to have someone from the government to explain better how the idea was conceived. Well, everyone, our time is up. I'd like to thank Ronaldo, Padenot, Gustavo for your time, for the discussion. I hope you have enjoyed the discussion. I think it's food for thought for providers who are here and really, take a better look at how to handle users or take care of users for the future. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Obrigado a todos.
Thank you very much. Well, just 2 announcements. One, don't forget to give back the headsets. You're going to pick them up again tomorrow. And then don't forget to go to the reception. We are going to start the beer gear, get a t-shirt and a token from the 20 years of XBR. And enjoy your beer at the Beer and Gear. For those of you who are remote, see you tomorrow. We'll be back at 9 a.m.